The huge palace, as if coming to life against the backdrop of the sunset, as if completely engulfed in the soft rays of the dying sun, is filled with warm colors and a mysterious atmosphere. The man confidently held an important document in his hand, and after reading it carefully, with a deep understanding of the situation, gave his approval for the capitulation of the Shidate Principality, thereby finally ending a long and difficult period. The guards stood nearby, heads bowed in silent respect, as if acknowledging the importance of the moment and their involvement in the events unfolding before. The emperor, seated on his throne, added solemnly that this had been his father's cherished dream, a dream which he had never been able to realize by seizing the lands beyond the iron mine. Margrave, with his head bowed and his eyes closed, listened with respect to the laudatory words of his master, who noted his merits and diligence in carrying out an important task. Placing his finger to his lips and bowing his head slightly, the emperor, with a warm, almost sly smile, declared that he had long considered how to reward this valiant man for his devoted service, which had played such an important role in the fate of the kingdom. The aristocrat's eyes widened in surprise when the king reminded him that the nobleman had an heir who had just come of age and was now ready to marry, which would open up new horizons for their line. This man's son was named Eric, and he was 24 years old. He had black hair, and his eyes, deep and mysterious, resembled bottomless pools. With a decisive wave of his hand, the emperor declared that he was ready to give his sister in marriage to the count's heir, seeing in this step not only political advantage, but also an opportunity to strengthen the alliance between their families. The princess was considered dead by high society, as no one had seen her at public events or noble gatherings for a long time, which gave rise to many rumors about her fate and led to doubts about the existence of the beauty. Margrave, inwardly dissatisfied with such a proposal, understood that it would be extremely inappropriate to openly refuse the ruler. He tried to hide his doubts, trying to find a compromise between duty and personal desires. The man on the throne confidently ordered the maids to bring the princess here so that the inhabitants could finally see her. This moment was long awaited, and also promised to be a real event for the entire kingdom. The door opened slightly, and in the dim light appeared the figure of a woman in a simple, modest dress, which, like darkness itself, shrouded in mystery. Slow steps and a reserved posture indicated that she was ready for an important meeting. The guards froze in complete shock, their faces drawn out in horror, and sweat trickled down their cheeks like rivulets, foreshadowing impending disaster, while they listened to the silence, afraid to utter a word so as not to disturb the ominous atmosphere. A thin, dried-out and exhausted foot stepped barefoot quietly across the cold floor, making a barely audible sound, trying not to disturb the silence around and not to attract unnecessary attention to itself in this gloomy and deserted space. It was Miesa Esquilier, who held her hair modestly, looking away. She wore neither a luxurious dress nor expensive jewelry, which emphasized her simplicity and modesty in this silent and cruel world. Eric looked at his future bride in surprise, feeling deep sympathy for her, as if realizing all the difficulties and trials that she had to endure on her way. The girl's eyes were blue, but lifeless and empty, devoid of shine, which gave her face a sad and mysterious look, as if she had lost something important and was now looking for it in the world around. With a mocking smile, full of playfulness and mystery, the emperor, with slight disdain, ordered his shy sister to come closer, wanting to reveal secrets and make her feel awkward. Opening her mouth, the lady made strange sounds that mixed surprise and confusion, and quickly walked towards her brother, trying to explain her emotions. On the way, she suddenly tripped over a stone and fell to the ground, and in this fall, her long hair became tangled, strands striving for freedom, gently wrapping around her legs and leaving traces behind. Like the devil, the man chuckled with a malicious smile, saying that his sister was a little unlucky with her health, but at the same time he was in no hurry to come to her aid, leaving his relative in a difficult situation. Margrave, deeply horrified by the emperor's cruelty and all that was happening in the kingdom, muttered that it would be a great honor for their family to welcome a princess who, despite all obstacles and misfortunes, could bring hope. Eric, who was standing nearby, added that he would also do anything to avoid disgracing the ruler's sister, even if it required significant sacrifices from him, since it was extremely important to preserve her dignity and respect. The king asked the young aristocrat to come closer to take a closer look at the future bride, wanting to appreciate her beauty and virtues, which could strengthen the union of their families. Footsteps were heard, and in the silence the sound of men's patent leather shoes could be heard, confidently tapping on the floor, filling the atmosphere with a secret expectation and anticipation, as if each step brought the important moment closer. The nobleman knelt down next to the girl, who was covered in dirt and looked exhausted. Raising his head up, he saw in her eyes a mixture of fatigue and hope, as if he was looking for comfort and support in this cruel world. With his large hand, he carefully took the lady's fragile hand, as if he was afraid to hurt her. And at that moment, a feeling of protection and tenderness arose between them, which gave her confidence that she was not alone in this difficult world. Gently lowering his face to the woman's palm, Eric promised that from now on he would take care of the princess and closely monitor her well-being, like a faithful knight, ready to protect the heroine from all adversity and danger. But suddenly the lady snatched her hand away and, making a sharp movement, with unexpected speed pushed the man away from her, as if wishing to create an insurmountable barrier between them that would protect them from unwanted intrusion. The beauty's face was distorted with fear and horror when she suddenly realized the seriousness of the situation that threatened peace and safety. Tears glistened in her large eyes, ready to break free. The king reminded his sister that she must behave well with her future husband, emphasizing the importance of their union and the need to strengthen family ties for the well-being of the entire. Miesa, taking a quick step, confidently headed back to her relative, leaving the guy alone in complete confusion, and with each step his heart filled with anxiety and uncertainty, until she disappeared into the shadows of the hall. Kneeling down next to the ruler, she bowed her head obediently as he began to stroke her head like his pet, causing her to feel mixed feelings of submission and tenderness. Like an animal, the aristocrat could only utter individual syllables as she tried to pronounce the word count. The words stuck in her throat, and she suffered from this handicap as she desperately tried to express her thoughts and feelings. The cart moved slowly through the dense forest, its wooden wheels creaking on the uneven road, surrounded by tall trees that seemed to embrace it with their spreading branches, creating a mysterious atmosphere. Inside the carriage, shrouded in silence, sat Margrave with his charming wife, a beauty whose bright eyes shone even in the semi-darkness, and they exchanged tender glances, enjoying a moment of solitude away from the bustle. At last, the long and grueling war, accompanied by brutal battles that took many lives and left deep wounds on the earth, ended. Peace was being restored again, and people tired of fear began to find hope. The victors of this decisive battle were the brave members of the Claddon, whose sign, a ferocious bear framed by two crossed swords, proudly symbolized their unwavering strength, unity, and readiness to fight for freedom. However, the king did not like this, and so he decided to arrange a marriage, hoping to strengthen his power and achieve an alliance with an influential family in order to establish peace and stability in his kingdom. The wedding was to take place between the earl's son and his sister, which would be a significant step towards strengthening dynastic ties and ensuring a lasting alliance that would promote peace and prosperity in the kingdom. Night had fallen, and the high towers of the castle, illuminated by the soft light of the moon, mysteriously towered over the surrounding area, creating an atmosphere of mystery and grandeur, shrouded in silence, interrupted only by the distant sounds of the night nature. The head of the family slammed his fist on the table in anger, furious that they had been rewarded with an idiot as a wife for their victory, and his rage only grew as he could not accept the fact that their family dignity had been called into question. Eric sat silently by his side, knowing that they couldn't refuse the king's offer, and the wedding had become inevitable, like a shadow hanging over them, leaving him with only a vague sense of unease about what this union would bring. With the help of cutlery, he ate slowly, enjoying every bite, trying to distract himself from the dark thoughts that constantly tormented him, and at the same time feeling how every taste reminded him that a wedding with the princess, the man, carefully taking the exquisite, perfectly cut piece of food, reflected on the fact that, as a noble Claden nobleman, he was obliged to follow his duties and fulfill all the requirements of his class. His cousin, a young man with expressive eyes named Ambaric Claden, discussed the upcoming engagement with members of another family with special attention and concentration, trying to take into account all the details important for strengthening their union. The father shouted loudly that they would immediately cancel this engagement since the ruler of their country, a real tyrant, had recently behaved in an extremely unacceptable and disdainful manner which threatened the honor of their family. Tallies stood near the majestic painting at the time, her calm gaze fixed on the men's animated conversation, but she preferred not to interfere in their heated discussion, keeping her thoughts to herself and remaining aloof. In her graceful hands, she held a bottle with an intricate engraving on the glass, which she was struggling to open, carefully turning the cap and trying not to attract unnecessary attention to herself. Finally, the thick wine slowly poured out of the bottle in a scarlet stream, sparkling in the light with rich shades of red like precious stones and creating an aura of velvety luxury around itself, with exquisite depth shimmering in every glimmer. The reflection of the young maiden, barely visible in the steaming tea, mysteriously asked what exactly he wanted from her and why he had decided to call her, thereby checking his intentions and testing hidden motives that might have gone unnoticed. The other two women, sitting on the sofa opposite, loudly declared that the princess should not have slept separately at all, claiming that such a decision could entail many undesirable consequences, and therefore she should be with someone. The ladies tried to convince the lady that if something bad happened to the noblewoman, the emperor would certainly become furious, and therefore they should closely monitor the young lady to avoid unwanted consequences. Feeling a migraine coming on, Tallies muttered quietly that they could assign servants to her son's bride to ease the burden and allow her to focus on the important matters of preparing for the upcoming wedding. However, the ladies were against this idea, because only the best, highly qualified servants, corresponding to her noble position and providing the necessary attention and care, were supposed to serve the emperor's. In the woman's hand, gracefully bent at the elbow, was a glass of deep red wine, which shimmered in the glass, reflecting the light and adding a mysterious shine to the female image, and also symbolizing exquisite taste. With anger on her face, the lady asked if they meant that her son had to serve the princess, as it was offensive to their family and not in keeping with his position in society, which required respect and proper treatment. The woman drank the drink in one gulp, feeling the warmth of the alcohol instantly spread throughout her body, giving her courage and confidence that she was ready to express her thoughts and defend her position. Eric remained calm, looking away, realizing that this night was filled with bitterness and resentment in his family, as if an invisible weight was falling on his shoulders, forcing him to think about how to fix what was destroyed. Soon the long-awaited ceremonial day arrived, when the carriage, with rich decoration and exquisite patterns, slowly and majestically drove along a winding road surrounded by green trees and flowering fields. The announcement of the engagement quickly spread throughout the village like a spring breeze, bringing joyful rumors and excitement to the hearts of the locals, who gathered in curious groups, discussing the details of this wonderful event. People, having recovered from the difficult trials of war, with smiles on their faces, took to the streets with flowers in their hands, joyfully celebrating the holiday and expressing their hope for a peaceful future that had finally arrived as a bright symbol of new life. Eric, dressed in white, stood among the celebrating crowd, but his face did not express delight. He was lost in his thoughts and knew the truth, which made this event bitter for him, since he understood that behind the mask of joy there were hidden obscure secrets. The castle looked cold and luxurious, its marble walls sparkling white in the sun, as if personifying grandeur and inaccessibility, which was both attractive and alarming. The nobles were loudly discussing the arrival of a princess no one had ever seen, their voices intertwined in a friendly hum full of curiosity and speculation about her appearance. Each of them tried to imagine what she might be like. One of the ladies, unable to restrain herself, began to talk about the rumors circulating around the princess, but feeling that loud words could attract unwanted attention, she immediately covered her mouth with her fan, causing her face to light up with slight embarrassment. The count's family majestically entered the hall, filled with light and the scent of flowers, bringing with them an atmosphere of nobility and grace that immediately attracted the attention of all those present. One of the courtiers quietly whispered to the man that the emperor would not be able to attend the wedding, which caused the master's displeasure. His face distorted with disappointment and anger, and sparks lit up in his hand clenched tightly into a fist, his fingers tensely grasping the air as if trying to contain his emotions that were bubbling inside, ready to burst out. Every muscle in his palm was taut, reflecting his inner struggle and determination. With a flourish of his magnificent cloak, Margrave turned and strode confidently down the hall, his confident gait radiating authority and determination, drawing the gaze of all present as they watched his departure in bewilderment. The guests who had taken their comfortable seats at the magnificently decorated wedding reception were full of anticipation and excitement. They were all eagerly preparing for the beautiful ceremony, which promised to be an unforgettable event. The priest asked the groom to take his place so that the ceremony could begin as planned, and all guests could enjoy the important moment in the couple's life. Eric looked stunning in his white robes with intricate gold embroidery, and his hair was neatly slicked back, giving him a confident and stylish look that was perfect for the beautiful event. Soon the door opened and Miesa Esquilier gracefully entered the hall. The servants carefully supported the lady, helping her to walk forward hesitantly, which added a touch of nobility and grace to the atmosphere of celebration. The aristocrats began to actively discuss the ruler's sister, who could barely move and looked extremely weak. They wondered whether she was drunk or suffered from a serious illness, which caused them considerable concern. The priest and Eric waited patiently for the bride to appear at the altar, their hearts filled with excitement and anticipation, knowing that this moment would be the beginning of a new life for the newlyweds. The priest began his speech by explaining that the newlyweds were now bound in holy matrimony before God and society, and their union would be marked by sacred grace and love that they would share throughout their lives. Eric kissed his bride tenderly at the end of their vows, and at that moment their hearts were filled with joy and tenderness, symbolizing the beginning of their journey together in life. The large house was illuminated with delicate colors, and the many stars scattered across the sky like sparkling diamonds added magic to the evening, creating an atmosphere of fairy tale and romance where every corner was filled with light. The servant stood by the young master, urgently reminding him that he should not have hurt the lady on their wedding night. She assured him that they would come in the morning to collect the evidence of their first night. Eric said that everything became clear and understandable, but his face was covered with thick darkness, as if veiled by ignorance and deep doubts that hid his true feelings and thoughts. Inside their room, Miesa lay silently on the bed, dressed in a light, airy dress. The female body was tied to the bed with a thin rope, creating an atmosphere of tension and anxiety, as if she was waiting for help or rescue. The surprised man froze in place, not expecting her to be treated so cruelly. His heart began to beat faster from shock and indignation, making him realize that he must immediately intervene to save the beauty from this terrible fate. The man walked slowly towards her, confidently walking across the smooth floor, as if every step was filled with anticipation and a slight excitement that hung like a huge cloud in the air. The girl's eyes remained just as empty and lifeless. Not a single spark of hope or joy was reflected in them, and this colorlessness only intensified the atmosphere of anxiety and uncertainty around her. Taking off his robe, Eric turned to his bride, and, with genuine interest in his eyes, tried to attract her attention, wanting to know what the beauty thought about him and their wedding, which had recently taken place. The noble aristocrat stopped when he noticed an empty medicine bottle on the ground that still contained enough liquid to put a horse to sleep, causing him to become slightly concerned about the consequences. The way the princess was treated, tied to the bed and not understanding what was happening, was so cruel that even prisoners of war from another country were not treated like that. Eric gritted his teeth in anger and resentment, unable to contain the storm of emotions that rolled over him like a furious wave, filling his soul with anger and disappointment, and the lights of determination lit up in his dark eyes. With tenderness and care, he began to untie the ropes that bound the lady's legs, aware of how much the girl was shivering from the cold, and trying to give her at least a drop of warmth and relief on this not at all warm evening. The lady's legs were visibly bruised from the rough and unpleasant fabric that had rubbed her tender and pale skin hard, causing even more sympathy and a desire to alleviate the great suffering. The untied black ribbon, symbolizing freedom and liberation from shackles, fell smoothly to the ground, creating a feeling of lightness and hope for a new, brighter path. The beauty's wrists were free, but they were also chafed, like her neat ankles, which gave her a look of fragility and vulnerability, contrasting with her natural feminine beauty. Since there was no other choice, Eric, trying to calm his bride, asked her not to be afraid, because he himself had to crawl under the covers for a while to hide from the cold night air. When it was all over, the man took a deep breath and began to tell his wife about himself, explaining that as a child he had been an only child and had suffered a terrible loss. His younger sister had died horribly, leaving his mother in grief. The beauty's face was blank and lifeless, without a single sign that she could understand human speech, but despite this, Eric continued to tell his story, hoping that in this way he could give at least a little comfort. The man gently and affectionately took the woman's long fingers into his hands, trying to give them warmth and tender care that can warm even on the coldest days. Amidst the long and monotonous chatter, Misa closed her eyes and finally fell into a sweet and peaceful sleep, leaving all her worries and anxieties behind, feeling the world around her gradually dissolve. The aristocrat himself stood up from his seat, realizing that he still had to create the illusion that they had actually had a first wedding night full of passion and romance. This lie was supposed to help the maiden remain innocent. The man's gaze lingered thoughtfully on the cloudy glass goblets, as if he was searching in their opaque depths for answers to his long-standing and painful questions that tormented his soul and gave him no peace. Morning came, and a soft blue sky spread over the castle, filling its majestic walls with soft light and creating an atmosphere of magic, silence, and peace. Nature itself welcomed the new day. Eric held the blood-stained sheet in his hands, showing this strange evidence of their first night, which came to him with bitter memories and a genuine sense of anxiety. The lady, looking at her friend with a serious expression on her face, declared that she intended to hand over this cloth to the priest, who would be able to verify the veracity of the state of the connection between the young people and check whether it was true. The ladies stepped forward confidently, knowing that their task was to help the princess change her clothes so that she would look truly dignified as a true lady, radiating grace and elegance in every. However, Eric blocked their way, explaining that his wife was still sleeping and needed rest after a long day full of worries and cares to restore her strength and meet the new day with a smile. Obediently, the maid stepped back and walked away, leaving behind the soft whispers of their conversations and the feeling of discontent that hung in the air. The man returned back to his chambers, confidently closing the glass doors to protect himself from prying eyes and create an atmosphere of privacy necessary for reflection and rest. Inside, on the floor, sat Miesa Escalier, who, like an invisible thief, tirelessly bit the coat of her handsome and incredible husband, leaving visible traces of her pranks and antics on the fabric. A worried Eric, slightly embarrassed, asked the lady to stop taking apart and tasting the clothes, explaining that it was completely inedible and absolutely inappropriate in this situation, since the clothes were intended for something else. As an alternative, he offered his wife, with a kind smile, to enjoy a delicious croissant that had just been baked and was perfect for a snack. The girl happily accepted the offered food and, smiling, began to enjoy every piece with pleasure, forgetting about all her worries and immersing herself in the indescribable taste. With a warm smile on his face, the Count's son said that he was sincerely glad that he was able to please his beloved wife, filling her day with light happiness and genuine joy, which was reflected in the woman's eyes. Eric soon returned back to his home, where he was happily greeted by a cozy atmosphere and warm light, creating an atmosphere of calm and security, reminding him how important it is to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. He did not come alone, but in the company of the princess, who was carefully accompanied by maids, holding the beauty on her feet and carefully supporting her so that she would not get lost in the crowd. Family treated the newly arrived daughter-in-law with coldness and distrust. Their stern looks and reserved expressions spoke volumes, and the maids stood nearby, seemingly watching what was happening warily. Margrave, turning away with a slight irritation, ordered his son to go and rest in his chambers, observing that he was probably tired from the busy day and the many worries he had had to endure. Suddenly the servants cried out in fear, asking the foolish princess to come down from the bear statue, which she had decided to climb out of curiosity because it was very dangerous and could lead to disaster. Eric rushed to his wife's aid, deftly picking up the princess of the kingdom in his arms and carefully helping her return back to Earth, where the sweet girl could feel safe again. Margrave, upset and gritting his teeth with anger, thought with displeasure that his son had married a lady who could not put two words together, not understanding how this could have happened and what they could have discussed in family circles. Margrave, upset and gritting his teeth with anger, wondered how his only son could marry such a stupid lady who could not string two words together, and what they could discuss in family circles. He ordered the maids to go and rest to recuperate after a hard day's work, full of worries and troubles, because they needed to gain energy before the new tasks that lay ahead. He ordered the butler of their aristocratic family to treat the lady with special care, as she was still feeling unwell and needed care and attention to restore her health and mental balance. The mother watched her son closely from the side, trying to understand how the boy was coping with difficulties and what feelings were currently overwhelming him, because it was important for her to know about his well-being. However, her feminine, cold expression on her face expressed nothing, remaining imperturbable and mysterious, which gave rise to a feeling of inaccessibility and mystery in those around. Soon the whole family will gather around a generously laid dinner table to enjoy the warmth of fellowship, delicious dishes, and a pleasant atmosphere of home comfort, sitting quietly and silently at their places. Eric was determined to take care of his bride on his own, not wanting to burden other people with his problems, and wanting to do everything he could to ensure her comfort and happiness. The courtiers mockingly stated that the young noblewoman always caused a lot of trouble during dinner parties, her unpredictable behavior causing surprise and mocking laughter among those present. When the conversation turned to food, the aristocrat, with a smile on his face, offered his wife a piece of tender meat so that she could enjoy the exquisite taste and delight her senses with a real culinary masterpiece. Taking a piece of food into her mouth, the lady began to chew, enjoying every sip, which reminded her of the subtle notes of taste and the skillful craftsmanship of the cook who had prepared this treat. However, suddenly Misa, unable to restrain herself, spat the uneaten food right in her husband's face, causing shock and confusion among those present, who did not expect such an unexpected turn of events. After this, she jumped up, grabbed a plate, and full of anger began to smash the table, throwing dishes and cutlery all over the room, causing surprise and alarm among the guests, who could not believe what was happening. Eric gently grabbed the lady by the hands and, looking into her eyes, asked her to calm down, wondering if she really didn't like the food that was served, which, in his opinion, was so exquisitely prepared. Without thinking twice, the guy stood up from the table and, with confidence in his voice, ordered the maids to give the lady time so that she could come to her senses and calm down after such a violent outburst of emotions. Margrave, overcome with unbearable anger, clenched his teeth so hard that the veins on his temples bulged. His face was distorted in a grimace, betraying the full power of rage and the deepest dissatisfaction with what was happening in the hall, where an atmosphere of confusion reigned. The man nervously fiddled with the edges of the table with his fingers and, taking a deep breath, asked whether there was really a need to keep the emperor's sister alive, given all the risks and consequences that this could entail for their family and the entire state. His wife, raising her hand in the air, tried to attract the attention of those around her, to also express her opinion, full of anxiety and determination, adding her voice to the discussion of an important issue that concerned their. These gestures meant that if a lady of royal blood were to die, they would quickly follow her without waiting for the consequences, because they would inevitably face the sword of a ruler who would not tolerate betrayal or the slightest hint of rebellion. The carriage depicted the mighty kingdom of Esquilier, representing greatness and wealth, with elegant patterns and symbols that emphasized its status and power among neighboring states, causing admiration and respect. There were 3 families that were called the pillars of this world, each of which played a key role in maintaining order and stability, as well as strengthening the power of the kingdom, passing on their traditions and wisdom from generation to generation. The Salakez family was responsible for the internal stability of the kingdom, wisely keeping swords in armor and providing protection from internal threats, maintaining order and peace among the subjects, and promoting prosperity and harmony in society. The second family, bearing the name Crispin, was responsible for internal security, protecting the kingdom with shields and strong security mechanisms to prevent any attempts at invasion and maintain peace among the inhabitants. The third family, the Claden, was responsible for the external security of the kingdom, protecting its borders from external threats and attacks, fighting enemies, and maintaining alliances with neighboring lands to ensure stability for their subjects. It was also known that the previous ruler of these lands had 3 wives, each more beautiful than the other, representing the diversity and richness of the kingdom's culture, and each of them played an important role in strengthening dynastic ties. The first queen gave her husband a prince who would become known as the evil tyrant Mermalican, plunging the kingdom into fear and confusion, leaving behind a trail of ruthless rule that would forever change the fate of their land. He stained the Salakez family flag with blood under the guise of rebellion, mercilessly slaughtering many people and devastating their lands, sowing chaos and destruction that forever changed the political landscape of. After this, he took up the swords and the crown, deciding to finish off the 2 remaining families who were not going to tolerate such cruelty. These families, uniting, began to organize a resistance, determined to restore justice. Together, they formed a secret alliance and decided that after the war was over, they would work to restore their lands and regain their lost status, full of hope for a better future and a desire to bring peace and stability back to the kingdom. However, things did not go according to plan. The Claden family, after long and brutal battles, earned admiration and praise from the common people, who saw them as protectors and true heroes, ready to defend their rights and freedoms, which led to the growth of their influence. And the king could not ignore this situation. The man's hand clenched tightly on the table, expressing all his anger when he realized that the power of his reign was beginning to waver under the pressure of popular discontent and the support given to the Claden family. Margrave was shaking with rage as he watched the proceedings, while his wife, sitting aloofly next to the servants, served drinks, trying to remain calm. A princess who was more like a beast with her wild behavior and unpredictability. The aristocrat thoughtfully explained that the maiden had previously been quite normal, but had lost her mind after seeing many common people die, which had left her deeply traumatized and a pitiful shadow of her former self. The nobleman, however, saw no reason for pity, being outraged by the king's behavior and his choice of a foolish princess as a wife for his son, whose antics only undermined the ruler's authority and called into question the common sense of his. Now his son's position was in danger because of this idiot lady who hung over him like a shadow, constantly interfering in the affairs of the kingdom and undermining his authority with her whims, which did not give him peace and caused anxiety about the future of their dynasty. Eric remained silent, looking down at the floor, not daring to meet his father's eyes, feeling the growing pressure and disappointment emanating from him, and realizing that such a choice and attitude towards the princess had become the source of deep problems in their family. Margrave, mockingly raising his glass of scarlet wine, asked whether the Duke of the neighboring lands had decided on a desperate act, and then, without hiding his contempt, called him weak-willed, emphasizing that such qualities have no place in the political game. Hegel was the same duke, and also the king's cousin, distinguished by his wisdom, fair hair, and high status in society, which made the guy a respected figure in the kingdom, despite the ridicule and accusations. This man was needed for the coup, but after the war he remained crippled, having lost not only his health but also the ability to have children, having locked himself in his mansion, where he suffered from memories of the glorious past. The count jumped up from his seat, shouting loudly and angrily that everything was not going according to plan, his voice filling the room with rage and despair, expressing concern about how quickly the situation was getting out of control and how it could affect his own interests. With a quick step, the aristocrat walked away from his family, seeking refuge from the tense atmosphere and unbearable tension that filled the hall, seeking solitude where he could comprehend what was happening and perhaps come up with a plan. A red liquid poured into the glass, filling it to the brim and spilling over the edge, creating small drops around it that instantly stained the snow-white tablecloth, as if symbolizing the growing tension. Eric, who was sitting at the table by force, decided to express his opinion to his mother about the future marriage, noting that earlier it seemed impossible, because the king was always very observant and did not miss the slight. However, without a clear heir, it was difficult to convince the nobility, and so the question arose of how long the marquise's daughter could remain unmarried, since women's status and destiny now depended on the decision they had to make to maintain influence. Mother couldn't help but agree, adding that it seemed that the duke's long time on the battlefield had dulled his political instincts somewhat, compromising his ability to make wise decisions in such a difficult situation. And in the conversation, they voiced the proposal to hand over the emperor's sister, a poor, innocent lady who found herself in a difficult situation, as a possible alliance that could strengthen their positions and create new alliances. Looking down at his drink, the aristocrat muttered that they should first assess the situation before making any decisions, emphasizing the need for a cautious approach and analyzing all possible consequences. The mother responded by telling her son not to become too attached to his bride, emphasizing the importance of maintaining emotional distance and clarity of mind in a situation where political intrigue and twists and turns could turn against him. The young gentleman's face became surprised. His eyes were swollen with surprise, and his mouth remained closed, unable to utter a word in response to his mother's words, feeling how feelings and thoughts were fighting inside him, not allowing him to find the right words. The lady explained her thought that all men are often led by appearances, and they will have to pay too dearly for the kindness shown to the emperor's sister. The woman asked the guy not to torment his future wife. Night had fallen, and the stars were almost invisible. Only the dim light of the moon barely illuminated the towers, creating a mysterious atmosphere in which everything around was shrouded in semi-darkness, and it seemed that the darkness concealed many secrets and unspoken words. Footsteps could be heard along the corridor of the mansion. The boy walked along the red carpets. His steps made a quiet sound, absorbed by the softness of the fabric, and it seemed that every movement disturbed the peace of the night, filling the picture with anticipation and tension. Eric wondered in his mind if his dear mother hated the princess as much as he did, and wondered if her smile was just a mask to hide her true feelings. Thoughts of what was happening behind the doors of their palace haunted him. Then he remembered how the lady, defenseless and covered in wounds, lay on the bed on their wedding night. Everyone treated her cruelly, leaving her no choice and no opportunity to respond, and this image evoked a feeling of guilt and regret. The Earl's heir's attention was drawn to the loud cries of the maids from the door where the light was burning in the darkness. They insisted that the mistress go to bed immediately. Their panicked voices awakened alarm, and Eric could not ignore these calls. While the maid lay on the bed, the maids discussed how the lady had eaten too much food that day, which was why she did not want to go to bed early. Their whispers were full of concern and bewilderment because, despite the usual rules, this evening was clearly different from others. They also loudly discussed the faces of their new masters and their strange expressions during dinner, not holding back their laughter and bewilderment, because the unusual behavior of the aristocrats caused them not only surprise, but also slight irony. Eric intervened in their conversation, declaring that he would put his wife to bed himself tonight. His voice sounded confident, but deep down he felt emotions, realizing that taking care of her was not only his duty, but also a chance to try to establish closeness between them. The lady's blue eyes turned to the guest who had entered the room. Their look was full of surprise and slight hope, as if she were looking to him for support and understanding in this difficult situation that surrounded them both. The servants looked down, ashamed that their gossip had been discovered, and then, slightly embarrassed, declared that they would come in the morning to check on the young lady, trying to escape the awkward situation and restore comfort. Soon Eric was left alone with his young wife, who had been sitting silently on the bed all this time, lost in her thoughts. The silence between them hung like an invisible barrier, and he felt the weight of words and omissions filling the space. As Misa began running her hands through her hair, trying to comb it, Eric said that she was in a good mood today, trying to lighten the mood and draw her attention to himself, while his words sounded like a gentle compliment. Sitting down next to the beauty, Eric added that this was their capital estate, and now they would travel here and then to Cladden's house, trying to create a feeling of a cozy home and share their thoughts with her. The guy's face looked at the girl, whose clothes had not changed, the same white dress with embarrassment and sadness, and he wondered if she really had any other clothes. In this simple but bright outfit, the lady looked especially fragile and vulnerable. Miesa raised her surprised face, noticing the interlocutor's intent gaze on her. Her heart beat faster, and curiosity flared in her eyes, because the girl felt that there was something more hidden in his gaze than just interest. The woman's lips pursed into a duck-like shape, and drool began to flow from them, creating a comical yet touching image that made Eric suppress a smile despite the seriousness of the moment. It was a reflection of her ambition. Miesa began to spit on her husband like a child, showing her playfulness and genuine sincerity. Childish behavior, although funny, reminded him that behind the mask of aristocracy, there was a fragile soul, like anyone else. Placing his hand on his bride's back, the husband declared that as soon as he finished work, he would join her in bed. The words were soft and encouraging, promising intimacy, and in that moment he felt something more growing between them. Before leaving, Eric added that she could call him if she needed anything. His voice sounded encouraging and caring, as if confirming that he would always be there, ready to help, and this promise gave her. The full moon was visible through the window, shining with a bright silvery light, filling the room with a soft glow and creating a magical atmosphere. The moonbeams danced along the walls, casting gentle shadows and making everything around seem mysterious and romantic. A young couple slept in a shared luxurious bed, sinking into soft feather beds and cozy blankets as if in the embrace of a warm cloud. Their faces reflected calm and trust, and the gentle sounds of the night enveloped them, creating an atmosphere of harmony. A light breeze gently rustled through the light curtains, creating a wonderful mood filled with freshness and lightness, so that the curtains, enchanted by this breath, began to sway smoothly in the rhythm of its touch. Suddenly there was a roaring thunder accompanied by a fierce thunderstorm, and Miesa opened her eyes in complete horror, feeling her heart beat faster from sudden fear and anxiety. Instead of falling asleep, she watched her sleeping husband closely, never taking her eyes off him and feeling the world around her dissolve into the silence of the night. The guy tried to find out if the woman had hidden patrons or lovers, but found nothing, so he decided to keep his little investigation secret to avoid unnecessary questions and suspicions. But after the end of the war, his father brought this girl here, making her his lover, which caused him internal discontent and bewilderment, since he could not understand what exactly attracted his parent to this girl. Eric decided to immediately inform his mother through the headmaid that Margrave had taken a second wife, as he considered the news too important to leave this event unnoticed. In response, the noblewoman indifferently stated that she did not want to hear about it, and would prefer to see the face of her disgusting husband as little as possible, feeling that this news would only add unnecessary worries and anxiety to her. So said the letter that arrived, leaving Eric with a sense of uncertainty and anxiety about how things would play out next, and causing him to struggle internally between his desire to understand the situation and his fear of the consequences. Reading the lines of the letter, Eric smiled tightly, realizing that it would be easier to divulge information about his father's second wife if she had any connections in aristocratic society. However, he realized that nothing of the sort existed. The paper was thrown down on the table with irritation, as if it had become a symbol of all those worries and problems that Eric did not want to endure any longer and which he had to deal with. Laughing, the man leaned back into the wooden chair and realized that he could not provide any evidence to support his suspicions, leaving the boy in a situation of uncertainty and frustration. The mother's reaction was entirely justified, since her relationship with her rude father had always been very strained, full of misunderstandings and hidden grievances, which made her especially sensitive to such news. Suddenly, Eric's eyes widened in shock as he saw movement on one side, and his heart started beating faster in surprise, causing him to become alert and pay attention to what was happening around him. It was Misa, who had woken up and was now sitting up in her bed, rubbing her eyes slightly and looking at her husband in bewilderment, as if trying to understand what had happened and why he had changed his expression so suddenly. Without thinking twice, the beauty stood up and headed towards the desk where her husband was sitting, confidently stepping towards him, thus wanting to find out the reason for his surprised look and find out what had him so excited. Eric, sitting in his chair, wondered if he should have said anything to his wife and came to the conclusion that it would be better for her to go back to bed and continue sleeping rather than face a reality full of worries and nightmares. But Misa did not listen to him. Instead, she extended her hand and placed it on her husband's bare shoulder. The beauty wanted to establish close contact with him and make it clear that she was ready to support him in any situation, no matter what. After this, the beauty sat on her husband's lap, clinging to him to show her support and closeness, and in her eyes one could read the desire to understand his experiences and share all his worries with him. The woman's hand began to sort through the documents on the table, carefully and with interest looking through the papers, as if she was looking for something important that could help solve problems and sort out the misunderstandings that had arisen. Taking one of the papers in his hand, Eric asked with a smile if she was curious, adding that in his opinion it was more boring than exciting, and looked at her mockingly, hoping to amuse his wife. Miesa giggled happily, tearing the letter into small pieces as if playing with it, enjoying every second of this funny process and allowing herself to plunge into a carefree. Looking at the girl from behind, he suddenly realized that until this moment, he had never thought about the fact that he would be able to spend time with her until the end of his days, enjoying every moment that they could share together. When the boy was first knighted with a sword, he was filled with a deep sense of responsibility and duty to his country, realizing that now on his shoulders lay not only honor, but also the duty to protect those who need protection. But reality hit him with unexpected force, like cracked glass, and all his dreams instantly shattered into pieces, leaving only the bitterness of disappointment and the realization that life sometimes turns out to be much tougher than expected. It eventually turned into a tense game of chess, with the two families relentlessly vying for power, using every strategy and maneuver to gain the upper hand, like pieces on a board that moved according to carefully thought out. Running his hand over the torn paper, Eric realized that none of this really mattered. The main thing was that his wife liked it, because her happiness became the most important thing, and the husband was ready to overcome all obstacles for the sake of seeing a. Gently embracing the lady's shoulders with his arms, the man thought about how he had not previously placed great hopes on his relationship with the woman, because he had always been used to carrying everything on his shoulders, relying only on himself, and now his heart was filled with warmth. Suddenly, Miesa noticed a coat of arms on one of the sheets of paper and, full of curiosity, pointed at it with her finger, as if trying to unravel the mystery hidden behind it. Her eyes sparkled with interest, as if she were opening a new page in a fascinating. When she wanted to touch it, Eric quickly grabbed her hand, not allowing her to tear up this important document, realizing that the contents contained important information sent from the nobles. Approaching her from behind, Eric resolutely told her to immediately stop what she was doing, because her patience was running out, and the handsome man could no longer stand aside. Holding the paper high so that the stupid Maesa could not reach it, the smart man sternly added that this thing could not be touched, because it contained important and confidential information. With her small hands and small stature, she tried to reach for a bright picture that was out of her reach, causing a feeling of anxiety and a desire for what seemed out of reach. A new day dawned, and the mansion continued to stand, radiating incredible beauty, but at the same time leaving a feeling of coldness and inaccessibility, as if guarded by secrets hidden behind high-rise walls. The maid stood next to her mistress and asked whether it was worth preparing the brazier for the upcoming concert, because it was already March outside, and the cold wind reminded of the need for warmth and comfort on this spring day. The aristocrat, reading the document carefully, nodded and agreed, saying that this year the winter had been significantly colder than usual, and this circumstance required special attention to preparation for the upcoming events. Suddenly the princess entered the room, followed by her servants, persistently asking their mistress to walk more slowly so as not to confuse the others, and so that no one would lose sight of her in this bustle. Tired, sweet Miesa simply lay down on the floor in the middle of the room, closing her eyes and allowing herself to forget about all her worries and anxieties for a moment, immersing herself in the silence and peace of the surrounding world. The lady of the house's maid could not help but notice how the lady addressed the princess as if she were a stranger and not part of their family, which betrayed the tension in the relationship and created the feeling that some secrets were hidden between them. The noblewoman indifferently confirmed that until now she did not know how to properly address the strange and stupid sister of the emperor himself without hiding her displeasure and disdain towards her. It was only an empty formal rule. Smiling graciously, the lady explained that she had spent a long time abroad, and then asked the princess's servants how to address the young lady, sincerely hoping that misunderstanding would not cause Receiving silence in response, the woman became convinced that her daughter-in-law's servants were useless, and therefore decided to seek advice from her maid, who, as it seemed to her, could give more useful recommendations. The aristocrat remembered that the princess had a name, and so decided to call her by that name, hoping that it would soften the atmosphere and help establish a warmer interaction between them. Misa, hearing the familiar word, immediately jumped up from her seat, responding with curiosity and hope that this appeal concerned her and would bring some important news or opportunities. She smiled widely, revealing her teeth, and in this sincere smile one could read happiness and joy, as if she was ready to share her mood with those around her who were standing nearby. The noblewoman was pleased with this reaction, glad that she had managed to establish contact with the strange girl, and this interaction gave her hope for further rapprochement and understanding. When asked to take care of the girl, the lady agreed and added that the maids could leave and rest, thereby showing concern not only for the new tenant, but also for her servants, appreciating their work and need for rest. The servant turned away silently and, without saying a word, walked out of the hall, leaving behind a feeling of incompleteness and slight tension in the air, as if she carried with her unfinished thoughts and feelings. The servant standing next to the noblewoman sighed heavily, trying to maintain a perfect appearance in front of the servants from the emperor's palace, and her tension was visible in every movement. The lady was struggling with her inner experiences. The noblewoman smiled mysteriously, wanting to figure out why the princess's own maids were allowed to show such laziness and incompetence towards their young mistress. Curiosity only fueled her interest in the secrets hidden behind these relationships. While the adults were talking, Misa thoughtfully looked at the carpet, running her finger along its patterns, immersing herself in her thoughts and allowing herself to be distracted from the conversations that seemed distant and insignificant to her. Tallies turned to Adele, who was standing nearby, and asked for some headache medicine, hoping that a simple remedy would help ease her condition and restore her clarity of mind to continue the conversation. One of the maids handed the lady's assistant a tray on which cups and treats were neatly arranged, ready to be served, giving the atmosphere a cozy and friendly atmosphere and inviting everyone to gather at the common table. On the metal surface, slightly covered with a light layer of dust, homemade cookies, a transparent glass, and a jug with a mysterious medicine were comfortably located, creating a feeling of forgotten moments and serenity. Adele expressed her sincere gratitude to the servants, noting that they had done an excellent job, filling her heart with warmth and appreciation for their work. At this time, Miesa had already settled comfortably at the feet of her mistress, like a faithful pet, immersing herself in an atmosphere of peace and comfort, and with a serene expression on her face, enjoyed the warmth and care in this quiet house. The maiden, sincerely striving for affection and warmth, gently lay down on her mistress's lap, and she, with a kind smile, allowed her to enjoy this moment of closeness and care, creating an atmosphere of comfort and mutual understanding. The maid was anxiously worried about her mistress and her headache, but was interrupted by the lady, who loudly declared that the princesses must be about 20 years old, emphasizing her certainty on this matter and interrupting all other thoughts. Thoughtfully, the lady added that there were rumors that the emperor's sister had witnessed a bloodbath at a young age, after which, overcome with horror, she lost her mind, which forever changed her fate and left a mark on the life of the beauty. In the lady's eyes there arose sincere pity and sympathy for the poor, beautiful child, who seemed to be surrounded by invisible clouds of grief and fear, causing a desire to help and protect him from all misfortunes. The maid watched in shock and silence as her mistress, who had previously been cruel, suddenly changed her attitude to be kind towards her son's bride, as if magically overcoming her previous prejudices. As the lady gently stroked her head, Misa glanced at Adele, who stood next to her, watching this touching scene with curiosity and warmth, feeling a sense of understanding and support in the air. The beauty's eyes were bright blue, but there was some emptiness and fog in them, as if they were hiding inaccessible secrets. Her mouth was slightly open, giving her face the appearance of a mystery, leaving those around her in the dark about what the lady was really thinking. Suddenly there was a loud clap of thunder, and a fierce thunderstorm came down from the sky, causing the sweet princess to open her wide eyes in horror, full of anxiety and uncertainty, and look around. However, suddenly Talia stepped aside, saying that it was time for the princess to trim her long nails and carefully brush her long shimmering hair to complete her flawless look. Eric was also shocked by the information from the butler, who informed him that his wife had spent the entire morning in the company of her cold mother, which caused him mixed feelings and deep thoughts about family relationship. Confident footsteps in heavy boots could be heard, quietly making their way across the soft, fluffy carpet, filling the room with a light echo that broke the oppressive silence and made everyone pay attention to the approaching person. The man was walking down the corridor when he suddenly heard loud cries from courtiers trying to help a royal person in distress, which made him feel anxious and want to find out what was going on. However, Tallis was adamant and firmly told Adele that she would cut the princess's nails herself, who was carefreely lying on the sofa, looking up at the ceiling and lost in her thoughts, as if ignoring everything that was happening around her. The ladies froze in anticipation as another man entered the room, curiously asking what they were doing, and their faces instantly filled with confusion and uncertainty. One of the ladies' hands held the princess's leg tightly, trying to keep it in place, while in the other hand a pair of sharp scissors gleamed, ready to cut, creating an atmosphere of tension and anticipation. The mother calmly explained that she was helping another girl with her nails because she had become uncomfortable walking while walking, and she could not allow herself to feel uncomfortable, especially when the streets were so beautiful. At a young age, even little Eric did not receive as much care and attention from his mother as he does now, and this left a deep mark on his heart, making him dream of being loved and protected. The adult mother cared for him, but from afar, looking at him coldly and indifferently, with her long hair fluttering in the wind, as if trying to keep a distance between them and hide her true feelings. The woman's face always remained emotionless, as if behind the mask of coldness there was hidden a deep rationality that did not leave the features of her expression and gave her a mysterious, detached look. But now she looked at the princess with a tenderness and affection that was completely unusual for her, and it filled the atmosphere of the room with unexpected warmth and softness, as if she had once again found a part of herself that she had long forgotten. This expression appeared on the face when the maiden looked at her youngest daughter Rosie, who died at a young age, filling the heart with nostalgia and evoking warm but bitter memories of those days when they were connected by an invisible thread of love. The mother projected the image of Rosie onto the princess, seeing similar features and the same eye color, which caused mixed feelings in her, the joy of memories and the bitterness of loss, filling her soul with both the light and the shadow of the past. Eric extended his hand towards the woman, saying that he wanted to take care of his wife himself and cut her nails, wanting to demonstrate his love and care that seemed to be lost in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. With determination and persistence, he snatched the device from the gentle female hands, thus wanting to free it from their dominion and take it for himself, demonstrating his strength and confidence. His mother's behavior became too wild and intrusive at the mere mention of little Rosie, causing a storm of emotions in her that left no room for calm and reasonable reflection. Eric tenderly took the lady's foot in his hand, gently supporting it and conveying his care and attention, which created a feeling of warmth and trust between them, as between close people who share a special connection and understanding. He carefully began to cut her nails, being careful and attentive, not wanting to harm the lady and trying to make this process as comfortable as possible for her. The beauty watched her chosen one with slight interest, lying on the sofa and not showing the slightest disobedience, as if enjoying the moment and his attention to herself. Suddenly, Adele felt a heavy, negative aura spreading around her, as if dark clouds were gathering in the air. Her mouth hanging open in confusion, she turned her gaze to the source of this inexplicable anger, feeling fear creeping into her body. There, on the soft coverlet, lay the princess, her lips pouting, biting them angrily, and with a furious look full of irritation and discontent, as if the whole world was disgusting and unbearable to her. Adele suddenly remembered the medicine that was supposed to help the princess and the sweet cookies neatly laid out on a tray nearby. The lady hoped that this would not only ease the princess's suffering, but could also lift her spirits a little. Without thinking twice, Adele grabbed the tender cookie with the delicious icing, and without thinking, shoved it into the princess's mouth, believing that the sweet taste would be able to cheer her up and make her forget about all the grievances that so. Everyone froze in anticipation of the girl's reaction, who, calmly chewing the pastry, seemed immersed in her own thoughts, as if she was looking for answers to questions that troubled her tender soul in this activity. Adele explained her actions by noticing how uncomfortable Misa felt and decided to give her a pleasant surprise by giving her sweets to cheer up the princess and create a friendlier atmosphere. Tally's, holding back her laughter, covered her mouth with her small hand, trying not to give away her amusement when she saw how funny the situation that was playing out in front of her looked from the outside. A quiet and mysterious night had arrived. The full moon rose majestically into the sky, illuminating the surroundings with a soft and cold light that gently touched the earth, creating mysterious shadows and filling the world with the feeling that nature itself was whole. Sitting at the table with his wife, Eric attentively helped her with her food, insistently asking her to chew each spoonful thoroughly so that she could enjoy the taste and not rush through her meal. The girl ate carelessly. Her beautiful face was stained with the remains of the soup, and pieces of food froze on her plump cheeks, giving her a funny and defenseless look that involuntarily made those around her smile. Wiping the frowning girl's face, Eric couldn't understand why his mother saw her as Rosie and was so concerned about her well-being, as if this girl was something important and integral to her. The butler bowed his head, and with sincere respect apologized for the fact that they were a little late in serving the roast quail, explaining that everyone tried their best to make the dish perfect. Such a ruddy and golden chicken with a crispy crust, carefully placed on the table, filled the air with a magnificent aroma that beckoned and fascinated, causing an indescribable feeling of hunger and anticipation of a delicious dinner. Eric thought to himself that during the meal, Misa had been surprisingly calm, showing no signs of nervousness or embarrassment, giving the impression that she was completely relaxed and enjoying the moment. However, glancing at her, the man noticed how the girl had cowered in her chair, clutching her head with her hands and frozen as if in pain, which betrayed her inner state and reminded him that deep emotions were hidden beneath her calm exterior. Eric extended his hand with a worried expression, asking if everything was okay, but Misa only pushed away from the table in fear and horror, and the chair the lady was sitting on began to fall back along with her, creating a feeling of complete confusion. Her hand reached out to the roast quail with horror, as if she wanted to knock the dish over and remove it from sight, trying to get rid of the obsessive sight that was causing her anxiety and worry. Rising from his seat, Eric headed for the door and ordered the new dish to be removed from the table. The maids had lied to him in the past, claiming that the princess had no food she didn't like, but now he realized that wasn't entirely true, and his anxiety only grew. Miesa was breathing heavily, pressing her hands to her chest, trying to catch her breath and calm her rapid heartbeat. Anxious thoughts mixed with panic, covering every cell of her body, not allowing her to focus on the surroundings. The weather was fine, and the wind gently rustled the leaves on the trees, creating a melodic whisper that reminded us of the approaching autumn and gave us a feeling of lightness and harmony. The maids, while performing their household duties, persistently asked their mistress to get up from the cold floor, worrying that she might catch a cold and get sick because caring for her health was the most important thing to them. The beauty herself lay on the floor, carefreely playing with a ball of yarn like a kitten, completely oblivious to the surroundings and circumstances, enjoying a moment of freedom and serenity. Realizing that they would not be able to convince the lady, the maids laid out a soft blanket so that the beauty could lie comfortably on it, providing her with at least some protection from the cold and creating more comfortable conditions for her play. At this time, the servants quietly wove gossip about their mistress, who might or might not understand something, noticing her strange habits and behavior, which added intrigue and interest to her personality among the others. One of the maids with freckles began to parade in front of her young husband, who always held his wife in his arms like a child and cared for her with such tenderness that their relationship aroused admiration and envy in others. The servant looked disapprovingly at her colleague, who hinted that the gentleman had strange tastes in girls, and shook her head doubtfully, not understanding how such things could be discussed in their circle. Another girl, with large dark eyes full of care and tenderness, said pitifully that it would be wonderful if their princess would get some warmer clothes, as the air was gradually becoming cool and unbearable. Misa, clutching a ball of bright threads in her hand, closed her tired eyes and, feeling a slight warmth, relaxedly sank into a sweet, serene sleep on a soft blanket, drowning in her dreams of adventures and distant lands. Suddenly, a brilliant idea came into the maid's head, and she suggested that the young lady wear a bib so as not to get dirty so often during meals, as this would greatly facilitate the process of eating and keep the outfit in impeccable condition. A group of other maids, clearly less well disposed towards the princess, cast cold, irritated, and displeased glances at their colleagues. They watched with visible disdain as the others showed concern and During the training, the men fought fiercely with swords, honing their fighting skills and striving for perfection in every move. Their blows sounded powerful, and the concentration and tension in every look spoke of complete dedication to the Eric, covering his face with his hand, looked up tiredly, realizing that lunchtime had long passed. A slight hunger reminded him of the missed meal, but the day had been so full that there was simply no time left for food. A memory of his wife, who had once been genuinely upset by a modest dinner consisting of only one quail, suddenly popped into his head, and now Eric was overcome with excitement and concern for her well-being. Deciding to finish his training as quickly as possible, the man walked quickly through the corridors of the mansion. Doubts about the professionalism of the maids flashed through his mind, and worries about whether they were performing their duties properly did not leave him. The boy's eyes widened in surprise when he learned that Miesa, who had such a bright personality, was in the maid's workroom, where her presence seemed completely out of place and unexpected. After this, he was even more discouraged to learn that before this, the beautiful girl had fallen into the stream because she was so engrossed in watching the fish swimming in the water that she did not notice how she had lost her balance. With a smile on his lips, Eric felt happy that Misa was busy all day playing with the man's mother under her strict but caring supervision, thanks to which she was not exposed to any danger and could enjoy a carefree childhood. The butler, standing nearby with an impassive expression on his face, quietly hinted to the gentleman that the lady did not like the chapel very much, and his tone suggested that this might cause discontent and lead to further discussions. Misa was already much more relaxed about the boy's sweet mother, having become accustomed to her strict but caring manners, and could now easily communicate with her without experiencing the same anxiety. But as soon as they arrived at the chapel, the princess suddenly began to act restlessly, cowering on her knees, and because of her nervousness, it was decided to take her outside the door to the maids so that she could calm down a little. If there were sweets, they might appease the young lady who adored delicious and unusual desserts, and this might help her relax and distract herself from the worries tormenting her at that moment. Eric, determined to make the atmosphere in the house more pleasant, ordered the butler to always have fresh pastries on the table from now on and to never run out, because he knew how important it was for Misa and her good mood. The man bowed his head respectfully and replied that he would definitely monitor this in order to fulfill the order and ensure the uninterrupted availability of favorite baked goods that could please all family members. It was a cool day outside, and darkness reigned outside the window, and two figures sat at the table, deep in conversation, with glasses of wine in their hands, creating an atmosphere of coziness and warmth. The maiden's mouth was wide open in anticipation of finally being fed, and her eyes shone with sincerity and hope, as if she believed that soon a taste pleasure would be her reward for her patience. Eric happily fed his wife with a fork, glad that she had a good appetite today, and he felt how this simple joy brought them closer, filling the atmosphere with warmth and care. While cutting the steak, the man also hoped that the lady would appreciate the taste of the piece of meat, which was juicy and exuded an appetizing smell, filling the air with a delicious aroma, causing a desire to enjoy every bite. Taking the food on the cutlery, Eric, with a gentle smile and warm look, asked his wife to open her mouth, full of hope that she would appreciate the taste of this delicious dish and get real pleasure from every. A piece of food fell on the beauty's dress, and Eric, noticing this, carefully said that everything was fine, assuring her that he would help remove the dirt from the fabric, trying to do everything possible so that she would not be embarrassed and felt comfortable. After asking his wife for forgiveness for the trouble, Eric carefully raised his hand to remove the meat from her modest dress, trying to do it as carefully and delicately as possible so as not to cause her inconvenience and to maintain the atmosphere of a cozy dinner. When Miesa opened her mouth to grab the food from the guy's hands with her teeth, he raised his palm higher, not allowing the beauty to bite, and with a slight smile said that first you need to properly present the treat so that the lady can enjoy every piece. Eric insistently explained that the food was no longer fit to eat, and with a caring expression on his face, he promised to cut her a new piece that would be fresh and delicious so that the beauty could enjoy it without any inconvenience. Disheveled and offended, the princess grabbed the guy's wrist with her palm, angry that he took away the food, and her eyes sparkled with displeasure, as if she did not understand why he did this when she just wanted to enjoy the. Without thinking twice, the princess bit her husband's fingers, wanting to get the meat back, and her determination only emphasized how much she wanted to enjoy the taste of the dish, despite his attempts to limit her. Eric, shocked by his wife's unexpected action, jumped back, removing his hand and barely containing his surprise, and with a startled expression on his face looked at her attentively, not believing that the lady could act like that in response to concern. Misa also stared at the aristocrat in bewilderment, not understanding what she had done wrong and why he was behaving so strangely, and in his big eyes one could read genuine surprise because she only wanted to enjoy delicious food as before. The girl's face became hurt and dissatisfied, and her aura itself changed, filling with a feeling of bad irritation that could be easily felt. Tension hung in the air, creating an atmosphere full of misunderstanding and confusion. The hands grabbed the fabric tightly and pulled it towards themselves, as if trying to free themselves from everything that was in the way, and in this movement there was a strong determination and desire to regain control of the situation. With this sudden movement, all the dishes from the table flew onto the floor, splashing and breaking on the ground, creating real chaos and confusion that instantly engulfed the room, and the sounds of falling dishes resounded like thunder in the silence. The maid, intrigued by the loud sounds and noise, opened the door to see what was going on inside, and her curiosity grew with each passing moment as she tried to understand what had caused such a commotion in the room. An unusual picture appeared before her. The gentlemen were sitting at the table, all covered in food, and a plate was awkwardly balanced on the beauty's head, which added to the comicality of the situation and made the maid open her eyes wide in surprise. Taking the soiled princess with her, the woman thought that it must be very tiresome for an aristocrat to spend time with such a clumsy lady, and a picture full of curiosities and misunderstandings arose in her mind. There was a hand lying on the man's knee, and one of the fingers was adorned with a bite mark, a mark left by teeth, which spoke of a recent incident and brought a slight irony to the atmosphere, despite all the seriousness of what was happening around. Night fell, and the couple lay down in bed, covering themselves with a blanket that separated them on opposite sides, creating a sense of distance and tension, as if each of them was trying to find solace in their own thought. The guy's hand clenched into a fist, and his head was in complete disarray, as if his thoughts were rapidly getting mixed up with each other. The veins on his forehead bulged with tension, betraying the internal struggle and storm of emotions that were covering him completely. A memory came to him of the moment when the beauty wrapped her mouth around his fingers and bit them, leaving them with a feeling of unexpected pain and at the same time a sweet tension that made his heart beat. Although Miesa was his wife, her behavior was no different from that of a child or a pet, causing him both affection and slight irritation, as if her naivety and carelessness overshadowed all the seriousness of their relationship. Red with embarrassment, Eric covered his forehead with his hand, realizing that he should never have considered his wife as a lover, because it was wrong and caused internal contradictions that he could not ignore, disrupting the harmony of their marriage. Adele stood there, serving her masters, and reminding them that there was a poetry evening coming up on Wednesday, which promised to be crowded. Because of this, the princess would most likely be embarrassed to attend the event. The mother, seeing her son's questioning look, calmly replied with a smile that they simply had to be present at this event, emphasizing the importance of such social events for their status and reputation in society. The woman looked imperious and serious as she said that there would be hyena nobles at the event who were only waiting for them to show weakness. That was why they had to show their strength and confidence to avoid giving rise to gossip. A poetry evening sounded appealing, but in reality the event brought together wealthy women who, while drinking tea, discussed the country's corruption and the affairs of the royal family, turning what was originally a cultural event into a place of gossip and intrigue. This time, the Cladden family was to host the event, and the servants were running around the house with frantic zeal, doing household chores, trying to provide the perfect atmosphere for the party and satisfy all the whims of their masters. What worried Eric most was the arrival of the Marchioness Crispin and her only daughter, Lakin, as their families had not communicated for a long time, and this was the first meeting in a long time. The tension was growing, as he knew that great hopes. Under the watchful gaze of her son, the mother tenderly asked her daughter-in-law if she would like to take a walk through the greenhouse together, offering to enjoy the beauty of the flowers and the fresh air to take her mind off the worries associated with the upcoming event. Thales, unable to contain her laughter, cheerfully compared the aristocrat to a nanny who was overly concerned about her daughter. On the shoulders of this man lay a great responsibility for her safety and well-being. After this, the woman invited her son to also walk with them and enjoy the beauty of the greenhouse, but the man politely declined, citing many urgent matters that required his full attention. Miesa, chewing a cookie, looked absently at one point, immersed in her thoughts, which seemed incomprehensible and mysterious to anyone, as if she was traveling to another world, far from reality and the bustle around her. The orangery was spacious, with high ceilings and bright light coming through the large windows. The foliage of the trees smelled pleasantly fresh, and the fragrance of the flowers filled the air with a sweet and soothing fragrance. People worked hard, moving things and plants around the greenhouse, creating a harmonious order, while the husband tried to persuade his wife to follow him. She was capricious, stubborn, and insistent on her own way. Misa, wearing a new dress with exquisite embroidery, joyfully raised her head, looking around the new and unfamiliar place with delight. Unable to contain her emotions, she suddenly rushed forward, full of enthusiasm and curiosity, ready to explore everything around. The courtiers could not take their eyes off their mistress, who behaved like a child, with a sincere delight and carelessness inherent only to the very young. Her innocent and playful manners attracted the attention of all present. While the princess was enthusiastically examining the unusual flowers, the servants asked the mistress of the house about her opinion about the greenhouse, hoping to receive approval, because the creation of this beautiful corner of nature was the result of many months of work. Eric, standing behind, enjoyed the sight of his joyful wife, feeling a strange calm and peace, watching the lady's happiness and carelessness as she looked with delight at the bright flowers and delicate petals. Miesa, fascinated by the multicolored tulips, gently touched their bright petals with her fingertips, as if wanting to remember every detail and feel all the charm of their velvety texture, while her eyes shone with delight. One of the housemaids greeted her young mistress with a smile on her face, carefully holding in her hands a small cage in which was a beautiful bird, chirping and fluttering its bright feathers. The bird twitched its white tail. Its plumage was uniform, creating an impression of serenity, as if it were part of the very tranquility of nature, bringing lightness and joy to the atmosphere. A small bird with bright, intelligent black eyes stared ahead thoughtfully and intently, pushing its beak between the cold metal bars of the cage, as if trying to discern something mysterious and attractive in the world. Miesa froze in horror, staring at the pet with an expression as if the blood in her veins had frozen, and her face had turned deathly pale. Her gaze, full of alarm and genuine fear, was riveted on the creature. Her eyes were empty and lifeless, not noticing anyone in front of her, as if the soul of their owner was sliding somewhere far away, drowning in her own thoughts and experiences. In her memories, one after another, flashed the gloomy silhouettes of black crows circling in the stormy sky under the deafening peals of thunder and croaking frighteningly, foreshadowing impending disaster and making her heart clench with fear of the unknown. The bird spoke to the girl in a quiet but confident voice, hinting that her mother had probably made a mistake and that the girl deserved to be punished even for a minor offense, because order must be maintained no matter how cruel it may seem. The pet chirped loudly, opening its beak wide like a small monster, making a shrill sound that filled the room and made everyone turn towards it in surprise and slight fear. Covering her face with her hands, the girl let out a loud scream filled with horror and fear that echoed throughout the room, causing the hearts of everyone around to stop from an indescribable feeling of anxiety and worry. The beauty, unable to withstand the pressure of all the emotions, suddenly fell onto the cold floor of the greenhouse, feeling the coolness penetrate her body and make it tremble, while thoughts about what happened flashed through her head. The maids froze in fear and anxiety, looking at their mistress, who fell unconscious on the floor, their hearts filled with anxiety and their eyes widened in horror because they did not know how to help her in this anxious moment. Tallies, turning sharply to the side, heard a heart-rending scream, not expecting such a sharp and painful sound that spread throughout the greenhouse, causing her a feeling of horror and anxiety for the fate of her mistress. Eric, without thinking, rushed to help his wife, desperately clearing the way, scaring away people who stood in his way, and trying to get to her as quickly as possible, feeling in his soul growing anxiety and fear for the safety of his beloved. Gently grabbing the lady by the shoulders, the guy asked with sincere concern if everything was okay with her. Tears dripped from her blue eyes, slowly flowing down her cheeks and leaving wet marks on them, and the man's heart was filled with anxiety for her mental state. The girl rushed to embrace the aristocrat, hoping to find in him a reliable support and encouragement that would help her cope with the growing fear and anxiety that filled her fragile heart at this difficult moment. The princess trembled all over, overcome with cold and fear, desperately hoping for consolation, pressing herself against the warm body next to her, seeking in this embrace reliability and protection from the worries that tormented her soul at this tense moment. The uncomprehending nobleman asked in bewilderment why she had reacted so strangely, his voice sounding full of sincere surprise and slight anxiety, because he could not understand what had happened and what had caused such a violent reaction in her. One of the maids coldly stated that the princess apparently did not like birds, her hoarse voice sounding ironic, as if she was trying to explain her mistress's strange behavior, leaving a feeling of discontent and misunderstanding in the air. The girl with a white scarf on her head, overcome with fear, quickly hid the cage with the animal behind her back. Her beautiful face expressed excitement, and she tried not to show her confusion, hoping that no one would notice the panic that Thales was extremely unhappy that they had not informed her of the princess's fear in advance, and did not understand why they had traveled all the way to the border, if only to frighten the lady, leaving her in the dark and making her feel in a difficult position. The maids were unimpressed by such words and coldly stated that they took care of their mistress every day, so they simply forgot to mention such a small thing, and the Claydon family's house had already made such a fuss that it seemed ridiculous against the backdrop of their daily routine. Adele was extremely indignant at such outrageous claims and excuses from the servants, and, filled with discontent, opened her mouth, ready to say everything she thought about the situation, to express her emotions and put an end to this absurd conversation. Eric silently held the princess tightly to him, wanting to protect her from anything that could hurt her, while his mother maintained an oppressive silence, creating an atmosphere of anxiety and tension around them, each of them experiencing their own fears. Misa began to sob loudly, tears streaming down her cheeks, flooding her face and leaving traces of grief that expressed immeasurable suffering and depression, plunging the lady into a world of despair and pain. In the end, it was decided that Eric would take his wife and take her to a calmer place, carefully carrying his lady in his arms, trying to surround her with care and protection, to calm her down and give her the opportunity to escape from the disturbing situation. Carefully wrapped in her husband's cloak, Misa could not hold back her tears and, all red from worry, howled loudly throughout the garden, pressing her hands to herself as if she was seeking consolation in her own arms, trying to cope with her inner grief. The aristocrat solemnly announced that from that moment on there would be no birds in their mansion, emphasizing the seriousness of his decision and striving to create an atmosphere of calm and order that could help everyone get rid of worries and anxieties. The lady suddenly put her hand behind her husband's back, and her fingers pointed towards the garden, as if she wanted to draw his attention to something important that was happening outside their conversation. Her expression betrayed confusion and hope. The aristocrat reminded the girl that there could be those in the garden that Miesa was afraid of. His voice sounded confident and insistent, as if he wanted to convince her of the need to be careful and not give in to impulses that could lead to new experiences. Eric thought about it and, despite all the warnings, still gave in to the request of the girl, who desperately wanted to go to the garden. The man thought that, probably, she was afraid of being locked within four walls, and his heart was filled with sympathy. The couple sat down on a wooden bench as the wind blew gently and the leaves slowly fell from the trees, creating an atmosphere of calm and tranquility. The world around them stopped for a moment, allowing them to enjoy each other's company. The man's hand gently wiped the tears from the lady's cheeks, while Eric, full of determination, vowed to protect the beauty from all birds, his voice sounding confident and ardent, promising her safety and support in any difficult times. The girl, with a blush on her face, looked at her savior, who had treated her so caringly and kindly all this time. Gratitude and admiration shone in the woman's eyes, and her heart was filled with warmth from the realization that there was a protector nearby. Convinced by her concern for her safety, she closed her eyes and was able to relax, allowing herself to forget for a moment the worries and fears that tormented her soul, and simply enjoying the silence and peace that reigned around her. The sun was shining brightly, generously illuminating the greenery of the plants in the garden, creating an amazing picture, full of life and beauty. filling the space with golden light and reminding us of the wonders of nature that surround us at every moment. Footsteps were heard, and the stranger, with curiosity in his voice, turned to the aristocrat, asking if he had been walking with his wife that wonderful evening, enjoying the atmosphere of romance and comfort that reigned in the area. It was a young man with a mole under his eye who, with a confident smile, declared that it seemed that Eric had become much closer to his bride, and the feeling of happiness flowing from them was impossible not to notice in the bright. The nobleman stood opposite his old friend and, looking into his eyes, asked with slight concern whether the beautiful Misa had slept, since her tired appearance the other day had revealed that she lacked peace and rest. Eric rudely and persistently ordered his interlocutor to immediately leave his sight, but he did not pay attention to this and continued to tease the man, as if enjoying his irritation and knowing that every reproach only fueled the tension between them. The handsome man stated with a slight grin that there were rumors about the two of them that had even reached his house, which made him feel like the center of all-encompassing attention and interest from those around him. Eric asked coldly and indifferently who was the source of such rumors this time. His voice sounded as if he already knew the answer, but was looking for confirmation to understand which of his acquaintances had decided to interfere in his affairs again. Since the nobleman had an uncle who would do everything to ensure that his heir gained power, it was impossible not to know the words he spoke, skillfully throwing dust in the eyes of other aristocrats, creating an aura of importance and influence around himself. The boy raised his head to the heavens and, with a slight melancholy in his voice, muttered that it was a maid with bright red hair who had arrived from the capital, whose presence seemed to bring with it a whisper of new rumors and intrigues. A memory suddenly appeared in my head of a servant who hid her bright hair under a cap and had a habit of mockingly discussing her masters behind their backs, which made her an invisible observer of the intrigues of the aristocrats. Amberic, preferring freedom, did not want to be his uncle's heir. Therefore, sighing thoughtfully, he admitted that there was also a spy among them. A young guy with brown hair and a slender body, who skillfully transmitted information. The boy trusted him ever since they fought together on the battlefield, swords in hand and armored, because in those moments filled with danger, they became not just comrades in arms, but also allies, ready to support each other. Eric, with a disappointed sigh, thanked his former brother-in-arms for his help and valuable information, realizing that their friendship, forged in the fire of battle, was the only true light in the darkness of political intrigue and mistrust. Amberic, sitting down on the grass, began to ask his friend about his relationship with his wife. Eric, shrugging his shoulders, briefly answered that the rumor about cutting nails was true, but he was simply helping with his mother, trying to maintain peace and harmony in the family. Many also said that the nobleman constantly carried his beauty in his arms, not allowing her to touch the floor with her bare feet, as if wanting to protect her from everything worldly and to show how highly he valued her. Eric explained that he was simply worried about the girl, who could hardly move and could not stand up for herself, so he carried his wife in his arms, trying to protect her from the outside world, which was sometimes too uncomprehending to a vulnerable nature. Amberic frowned and, with a distrustful smile, asked if the man felt anything for his wife, as if wanting to test the sincerity of his words and understand whether Eric was hiding something more than just friendly feelings behind his concern. The nobleman began to reason that he had previously believed that Eric was simply putting on a show in front of the king, playing the role of the princess's lover, but everything turned out to be different, and behind this game there was real care and affection. He pointed a reproachful finger at the nobleman holding the maiden in his arms and loudly declared that he was clearly overacting, as if trying to hide his true feelings behind a mask, while his real emotions remained in the shadows. Eric, with a cold and determined expression on his face, ordered the guest in his house to shut up, his voice sounding so confident that everyone around froze, realizing that interrupting the inappropriate jokes was not only undesirable, but also unsafe. However, Amberic could not calm down and persistently asked why he did not get rid of the beauty and free himself from the extra burden, as if he was looking for answers that could justify his own doubts and bewilderment regarding Eric's true feelings. The guy waved his hand and said that his friend had almost married Lady Crispin until that stupid princess came along, and his words sounded with a hint of irritation, as if he couldn't forgive fate for the fact that his friend's happiness was suddenly under threat. Eric briefly replied that as long as Miesa was useful to them and the king was happy, he was perfectly happy with it, emphasizing that despite his personal experiences, the guy was not going to give up the advantages. The girl dozed in her husband's arms, who gently stroked her golden hair, creating an atmosphere of calm and comfort, as if time had stopped around them, and they were the only ones in this world. As an argument, Eric added that Misa had absolutely no idea what was happening to her and had little intelligence to plan executions against Claudine, which only confirmed the opinion that her participation in the intrigues was unconscious. The leaves, driven by the breeze, danced in the air, and above the head stretched a blue sky decorated with fluffy clouds, creating an atmosphere of peace and harmony in which nature seemed to speak its own language. A few days later, Wednesday arrived, and a poetry evening gathered the aristocrats in the orangery, filled with the scent of flowers and soft light, where they discussed important matters, exchanged ideas, and enjoyed the art of words. One by one, the noblewomen entered the magnificent building, decorated with exquisite details. All of them were allies of the Claudine family, and their graceful figures, dressed in luxurious clothes, confidently emphasized the importance of this meeting. Among those who entered was the Marchioness Crispin and her beautiful daughter, dressed in a long, luxurious dress adorned with sparkling jewels that shimmered in the light, giving her an aura of grace and elegance. Eric and Misa came to the greenhouse to greet the guests. The man was wearing a beautiful suit that emphasized his status and style, while the girl was dressed in a simple gray dress with blue accents. Instantly, dozens of eyes stared greedily at the gentleman who had arranged this event, sincerely interested in what was in store for them that evening, and expecting fascinating conversations, subtle hints, and unforgettable moments. Throughout the meeting, there was an awkward atmosphere between the two families, and the Marquise and her daughter sat with expressionless faces, as if detached from what was happening, their cold gazes betraying the tension in the air. Eric, realizing that his wife was not in the best of health and that she needed to conserve her strength, decided not to burden her with unnecessary worries. He apologized to the guests, gently explaining that it was time for them to leave the evening's event. The handsome man turned around and, gently picking up his lady in his arms, confidently walked away, leaving the others sitting at the table. At that moment, their gazes were filled with envy and admiration because such a picture was the true embodiment of romance. Lady Crispin watched the departing couple with interest, although in her heart there were growing feelings of discontent and envy. However, she did not dare to utter a word against, fully understanding that at this moment it would be inappropriate to interfere. Finally, collecting her thoughts, she jumped up from her seat and called out to the man firmly, asking him to stop. Her voice was confident, while inside she was raging with emotion, and she understood that this moment could change everything. Eric, raising his eyebrows in confusion, stopped and turned to Crispin. He was curiously waiting for what she wanted to tell him. The man's face expressed confusion, and the guy froze in anticipation of words, not understanding where all this could lead. The dark figure, crouched behind one of the trees, listened with tension to the conversation that was not intended for her ears at all, and felt how the growing tension in the air could have a significant impact on her own secret plans. Crispin herself, having collected her thoughts, addressed the man briefly and decisively, urging him not to have children with the princess. There was insistence in her voice, and every word conveyed a sincere concern for the future. Behind her, the lady was holding something in her hand, carefully hiding it from the aristocrat's curious gaze. The wind was blowing, playing with her hair and fluttering her clothes, giving the whole scene an atmosphere of mystery and lightness, as if something important was about to be revealed. It was a simple, unpatterned handkerchief that the wind had carried off the lady's hand. It was floating in the air, trying to escape, and its simple fabric was in sharp contrast to the surroundings, full of mystery. The carriage, harnessed by a pair of powerful horses, rushed swiftly along the road, creating a melodic crackle of wheels and a ringing clatter of horseshoes, while the wind playfully stirred the curtains, filling this journey with a feeling of speed and freedom. The Marquise, anxiously pressing her hand to her face, persistently asked her daughter whether she had conveyed the message to the nobleman, and the woman's voice was filled with excitement and hope, as if much depended on this question. After which, the lady remembered with disgust how sweetly Eric hugged his wife at the event, and felt that the princess had nothing but her cute face, which could no longer hide the inner emptiness and lack of true feelings. The Marquise was sure that it was her daughter who should enter the Cladden family, because she considered this not only a fateful step, but also an important step for strengthening the family tree and position in society. It could be said that Lakin was raised solely for inheritance, with no training other than being a good housewife, leaving her with little opportunity for development and independence. But the girl herself, upset, stared at her hands, her head down and immersed in thoughts completely different from those expected of her by those around her. Dreams of a life full of opportunities that seemed unattainable hovered in her head. Her hands were far from delicate, they were scarred and calloused, indicating hard work and a struggle for survival. These traces of life indicated that she was accustomed to physical labor and was not afraid of difficulties. The sunlight gave way to darkness, and the stars began to illuminate the mansion, creating a magical atmosphere as the soft shimmer of the heavenly bodies reflected in the windows, giving everything around a mysterious and mystical. Despite the late hour, Eric was hard at work at his desk, signing documents and immersing himself in matters that required his attention, the shadows from the lamp softly illuminating the papers, creating a cozy yet tense atmosphere of late-night work. The father was so carried away by his new mistress that he often neglected his duties as a nobleman, leaving matters to their fate and causing discontent among his subordinates and acquaintances. The war placed many responsibilities on the young heir's shoulders, and he had to learn quickly to cope with challenges that required not only courage, but also wisdom in decision-making. Every day brought new lessons. There was also a severe food shortage. Plant and food supplies were extremely low, which created serious difficulties for the population and threatened survival. People were looking for ways to provide themselves with the necessary resources. If they can survive this difficult summer, then the soldiers, returning home from the battlefields, will finally harvest the crops on the fields, and the tense situation will perhaps gradually become more stable and calm, giving hope for a better future. Considering the significant role the Cladden family played during the war, they certainly deserved a higher reward from the emperor, who should have recognized their contributions and sacrifices made for the common good. However, the reward consisted of only a few war trophies and an iron mine, which was presented as a symbol of importance in the eyes of the public, but in reality did not correspond to the scale of the efforts put into the struggle by the Cladden family. Also, to top it all off, the princess sat restlessly in her bed, unable to find a place for herself and suffering from insomnia. Thoughts about what was happening did not give her peace, and the darkness only increased her anxiety, forcing her to think about what lay ahead. Eric stared thoughtfully into the distance, thinking that developing routes to the iron mine would do nothing to solve the food shortage. The resources invested in this work seemed useless when there was a threat of famine all around. While her husband was lost in his thoughts about work, Misa stood up and walked barefoot towards him, feeling the need to support him and distract him from his heavy worries. Her light steps created an atmosphere of comfort, and she hoped that she could help. Now the vassals were looking for a leader in the son of a rich count, who, having put aside his duties, stepped aside for the sake of his mistress, while looking at them with greedy and hungry eyes, full of expectation and hope for a change in the current situation. With their hands they reached out to the boy who had suddenly been saddled with so many responsibilities and duties for the lives of so many people, giving him a weight and significance that he perhaps had not yet realized. The vassal's fingers gripped his head, face and body, not allowing him to move for a moment, like a weight that pressed on him with its weight, burdening and filling him with fear. This sensation was oppressive, depriving him of freedom and confidence. Suddenly, Eric's eyes widened as if he had woken up from a terrible nightmare, and he stood there for a moment in confusion, trying to comprehend what was happening around him. Misa stood next to him, clutching the fabric on his shoulder and trying to get his attention, full of concern and support, hoping that her presence would help him gather his thoughts and cope with what was happening. As if sensing his deep feelings, the beauty pressed herself against him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders and giving him hugs and comfort. The gentle touch contained sincerity, care, and a willingness to support him in this difficult moment. His strong and powerful hands lay on her fragile waist, squeezing it in gratitude and tenderness, as if he wanted to show that he was ready to support and protect. Realizing all the vulnerability and importance of her presence at this difficult moment, the girl made strange sounds, as if trying to say something to her husband. The woman's voice trembled with excitement and emotion, and in every sound there was tenderness and anxiety, as if she wanted to express her feelings, but the words could not be found. With one hand, he opened the jar that contained the small lollipops, and the aroma of the sweets filled the air, creating an atmosphere of childish joy and warmth as the boy eagerly chose which one to give her. The handsome man carefully took one of the sweets with his fingers and gently pushed it into his wife's mouth, watching as her beautiful face lit up with a smile, and the air once again filled with an atmosphere of childish joy. Eric smiled happily, realizing that the girl not only did not run away from his arms, but also behaved calmly and obediently, which gave him a feeling of confidence and peace, as if they were connected by an invisible thread of mutual understanding. Several ladies, all dressed in pink dresses, stood with their eyes fixed on the floor and their hands folded in front of them, creating an atmosphere of involuntary modesty and shyness, as if each of them was lost in her own thought. Mother, with her arms crossed in front of her and her brows furrowed, listened to the explanation that Milady had dropped a handkerchief in their house, and her expression reflected displeasure, as if this situation could lead to undesirable consequences. This was a very serious problem, since a fallen handkerchief in a strange house meant a love affair between a man and a girl. Thales, realizing the importance of the situation, turned for help to Adele, who stood nearby and obeyed the mistress. The woman ordered her assistant to send all the maids along with the important guests to search for the missing handkerchief, realizing that the reputation of their house and possible discontent among the high-ranking guests depended on it. Adele agreed to help and suggested that, in order to avoid rumors, they lie that the handkerchief belonged to the marquise and not to her daughter, thus hoping to preserve the family's reputation and avoid unnecessary talk among the guests. It was a fine day, and the servants were busy moving about the neighborhood looking for the lost thing in the street. The bright sun illuminated their path, and the light breeze gave them a feeling of lightness despite the importance of the task they were performing. The ladies in bright pink dresses looked around in confusion, turning their heads in different directions, trying to understand what was happening, and the excitement was reflected on their faces, creating an atmosphere of anxiety and anticipation. The attention of one of the courtiers was drawn to a maid with a white kerchief on her head, who was moving behind. The figure stood out from the rest, and this aroused curiosity because her presence could mean something important in the events taking place. The old woman with the mole on her face glanced back at the other maid and nodded quietly, as if exchanging a quiet agreement with her, full of understanding and mutual support in the current situation. Stepping aside, the girl in pink briefly explained that the girl needed to be dealt with within 2 years, no more, emphasizing the importance of resolving the situation quickly and hinting at the potential consequences if nothing was done. With a wry smile, the maid mockingly declared that she could finish off that same woman even tomorrow. The words sounded bold and confident, as if she was not afraid of the consequences and was ready to act decisively at any moment. The girl lowered her head and explained that it couldn't be done so easily because they needed connections, and they couldn't go into the house Margrave owned every time so thoughtlessly. The phrases reflected an awareness of the complexity of the situation. It was decided to meet again in the city, while the fire blazed in the stove, filling the room with warmth and comfort. The flames danced, creating an atmosphere of comfort and the expected tension before the meeting, where they would discuss important issues. With cunning green eyes, the servant ordered the interlocutors to choose a time and place for the meeting. Confidence and determination emphasized the importance of the upcoming conversation, which could affect their plans. Evening had come and the sky was painted a soft pink, creating an atmosphere of calm and tranquility, as if the whole world was preparing for a quiet night full of promises and secrets. Miesa sat next to the lady, carefully combing the bride's hair, giving it a special chic. Today was to be a family dinner, and in the air there were hopes and expectations, full of excitement and joy from the upcoming event. The princess, lost in thought, chewed a piece of cloth between her teeth, not noticing how her fingers unconsciously played with it, creating a slight tension in the air, as if she was seeking comfort in this unusual gesture. Thales combed the beautiful bride's hair and noticed that it was good that the girl ate a lot, because a healthy appetite promised her strength and energy for the coming day. Margrave stood to the side, hiding in the shadows, coldly watching his wife and daughter-in-law from afar, his gaze full of conflicting emotions, as if he was trying to understand how everything had changed between them. The man's expression was frowning and irritated, and he was filled with rage that his clever son had chosen such a worthless lady as his wife, who, in his opinion, deserved neither love nor respect. Soon it was time for dinner, and the entire Claudin family gathered around the table, creating an atmosphere of warmth and unity. Despite the tension that was in the air, everyone realized the importance of the moment when it was necessary to put aside differences. The fork hit the plate with a loud bang, interrupting conversations and drawing the attention of the entire family, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and tension as all eyes turned to the one who had decided to speak. The aristocrat's teeth, sparkling like precious pearls, reflected a cold magnificence, while the maids, standing behind, hesitated in fear, fearing to incur his wrath, which could fall at any moment. There was a tense silence at the table, broken by an unexpected question from Margrave, who exclaimed in bewilderment why the hell the princess was sitting with them and eating carelessly, as if not noticing the tense atmosphere around. The wife hastened to reassure her husband, gently saying that Mesa was still practicing eating and using cutlery correctly, and that he should not worry about this, because everything would gradually get better. Eric was also kind to his lover, reassuring her and telling her not to worry. He tore apart pieces of solid food with his hands and was even willing to demonstrate to her how it was done so that she would not feel awkward. The indignant aristocrat exclaimed that the young maiden was old enough to take care of herself and eat normally without expecting help from other people who held the cutlery for her. Pouring the aromatic liquid into an elegant glass, the noblewoman, with slight embarrassment and tenderness in her voice, apologized to her husband, trying to smooth over the awkwardness that had arisen in their conversation. The man couldn't help but laugh at the lady's sarcastic response, while she, without losing her composure, asked her son to make sure that Miesa also ate the vegetables from her plate, leaving nothing extra. The man's palm slammed down on the table in anger, causing surprised looks from those around him and creating a tense atmosphere in the room filled with anticipation and bewilderment. Everyone present froze in anticipation of an explanation. Margrave jumped up from his seat, his voice loud and confident as he told his son to prepare himself, as they would soon be going to the emperor. It was imperative that the princess conduct herself with dignity and live up to high standards. After this, the owner of the house stood up and, without saying a word, left his place, heading towards the exit, as if wanting to get away from the family, who did not pay any attention to him at all, immersed in their conversations and affairs. Thales asked her son with interest if he had prepared gifts for the palace, because time was passing and they would soon have to visit a high-ranking ruler. It was important to make a good impression on such an important visit. The lady grimaced in disgust as she took the food she didn't like into her mouth and, barely restraining herself, wanted to spit on her husband's palm, but at the last moment she decided to curb her emotions so as not to raise unnecessary questions. There was a tradition in the kingdom to return to the parents' house after 50 days of marriage, and the emperor, taking advantage of this custom, decided to leave his palace for a while to visit his family and spend time with them. For this young couple, the palace became their new home, large and cold, with high ceilings and empty halls where echoes bounced off the walls, creating a feeling of loneliness and distance from the warmth of family. The last gift was carefully loaded into the carriage, while the servants hastily prepared the transport for the upcoming journey, checking every detail to make sure everything would be in order and they would be able to reach their destination safely. Eric, sitting inside the carriage, could not hear anything of what the maid said on the street, since the noise of the wheels and the shaking interfered with the perception of words, and the only thing he felt were his own thoughts swarming in his head. He could not help noticing, however, that it was strange how the previously lazy servants suddenly became active in their duties on the morning of their departure for the palace. The energetic movements and persistent preparations left him slightly. Next to the guy lay a girl in a beautiful, elegant dress, soft blue and decorated with exquisite embroidery, sparkling beads, which emphasized her graceful figure and gave the image airiness and lightness. The aristocrat approached his wife, leaning over her, and with a slight mocking grin, asked if she knew his name, as if playfully testing the woman's attention and memory of their mutual history. However, the maiden, instead of answering, turned away and buried her face in the soft seat of the carriage, as if wishing to hide from his gaze. Her lovely face slightly blushed from embarrassment and awkwardness in this situation. This sweet reaction, full of embarrassment and innocence, involuntarily caused a sincere smile to appear on the young gentleman's face, filling his big heart with the warmth and light charm he felt for his sweet wife. The two of them sat in the carriage, and her presence filled the man with joy, as if loneliness had gone forever, giving way to a feeling of warmth and comfort that this girl gave him. Every moment next to her was special for him. But suddenly their idyll was broken by a maid who lifted her dress as she entered the carriage. Looking at them sternly with her cold eyes and her displeased expression, she had come to remind them of their duties and that time was running out. Soon the coachman announced that they were leaving, and taking the reins in his hands, urged the horses forward, filling the air with the sounds of creaking wheels and powerful neighing, which announced the beginning of their journey. There was silence in the transport, plunging everyone present into a deep silence, where rustling sounds seemed loud in this atmosphere filled with anticipation and slight tension. Everyone was expecting something important that was about to happen. Soon the majestic towers of the palace appeared on the horizon, proudly rising to the sky, which, as if especially for this moment, was clean and clear, without a single cloud, which created the feeling of a special day, full of hopes and expectations. Inside the building, they were met by a courtier dressed in exquisite clothing, who, bowing respectfully, politely asked the gentleman to follow him, pointing to a long corridor decorated with magnificent tapestries and lamps. There was a sharp sound of footsteps on the polished parquet floor as someone in boots, confidently and quickly approaching, broke the silence, creating a sense of tension and anticipation in the air. Eric walked, supporting his wife by the shoulders, and at that moment a sharp ray of sunlight breaking through the window enveloped them in warmth, creating a special atmosphere of comfort and security despite the solemn atmosphere around. The inside of the castle had high ceilings, and beautiful stone statues, expertly carved, were placed throughout the room, while expensive jewelry and luxury items sparkled under the soft light, adding to the grandeur. Cold gray marble covered every part of the palace, giving it a monumental and austere appearance, while the smooth surface reflected the light, creating a play of shadows and highlights that emphasized the grandeur and sophistication of the architecture. The guy closed his eyes from the bright sun and thought that all this cold stone surrounding him was alarming, as if it reminded him of ancient secrets and the grandeur of the past, which could awaken at any moment. 20 years ago, a young king ascended the throne, wearing a large golden crown on his head and a luxurious fur cloak over his shoulders, emphasizing his royal status and youthful determination. Without much effort, he seized all power, relying on the strength and influence of his mother, who, being wise and cunning, easily paved his way to the throne, securing the support of key aristocrats and followers. However, 12 years ago, a tragedy occurred, after which the king's character changed, turning him from a cheerful and open young man into a gloomy ruler who lost faith in people and sought to protect his kingdom. The couple walked forward, and the man, lost in his thoughts, recalled the past, when people fell to the floor, their heads smashed, and an atmosphere of chaos and fear hung in the air, leaving a deep mark on his memory and shaping his current perception of the world. The guards stood in front, protecting the throne room and their master, greeting the guests with dignity and attention, their armor shining in the light, and their faces remaining serious, reflecting the importance of the moment and the solemnity of the upcoming meeting. The emperor sat on his throne, lounging with a stately air, surrounded by his subjects who looked at their ruler with respect and reverence. His majestic figure inspired fear and admiration, and his confident position emphasized his power. Eric bowed his head respectfully before the king, while his wife, standing next to him, mindlessly opened her mouth and absent-mindedly looked around the hall, as if trying to comprehend the grandeur of what was happening and the atmosphere of celebration that reigned around them. The ruler greeted the aristocrats with mockery and laughter, casually propping his head up with his hand, and also demonstrating his disdain for their high-flown speeches and giving everything that was happening a casual, even slightly ironic tone. A cruel smirk appeared on his face as he said that Mesa looked better after leaving the palace, the words coming across as a taunt, suggesting that perhaps she had blossomed away from the stiff norms of aristocratic society. Suddenly, the man's hands let go of the lady, and she, like a limp doll, began to fall. Her body lost all support as if time had slowed down, and those around her froze in anticipation, not knowing how to react to this unexpected situation. Like a puppet whose strings had been cut, she fell to the cold floor, lying motionless and staring blankly upward, as if seeking solace in the vastness of space, while panic and silence erupted. The emperor, with his concubine at his feet, looked emotionlessly at his fallen sister, showing neither pity nor sympathy, his cold gaze expressing only indifference to her fate. The maiden was just another pawn in the game of power. Putting his hand to his face, the man thoughtfully said that, looking at the healthier and more radiant face of his relative, one should expect a joyful addition to their family, because such changes usually foretell good news. Eric merely remained silent in response to this suggestion, which was laced with subtle sarcasm, and his silence said much more than any words could have expressed. One of the courtiers quietly whispered something into his master's ear, but Eric could not hear a word. In the end, he gave a vague answer about the birth of a future heir, hoping that this would somehow calm the situation. The emperor interrupted his subject's speech, not wishing to continue a long conversation without any action, and with a decisive gesture indicated that it was time to move on to more important issues that required an immediate solution. Quite quickly, the ruler switched the conversation to the bedspreads covered in blood after their wedding night, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation and the significance of the event that had left a deep mark on their lives. The man added that when the maids came to wash the lady, they found her completely unharmed and innocent, which only added to the mystery of the situation and raised even more questions about what actually happened. Eric stood frozen in shock, not knowing what to say in response to his master. The man's face turned pale and his eyes wide open, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard, and was searching in vain for the right words to express his thoughts and feelings. Moreover, the servants carefully checked the bed and the beauty's body every day, but nothing changed. She continued to remain virginally clean, which only increased the bewilderment and anxiety among all those. Rising from his seat, the ruler looked questioningly at the thief, wondering why he had not touched his wife, and his voice sounded both reserved and demanding, as if demanding an explanation for the strange circumstances. As he approached him, the man asked his interlocutor if he really did not want an heir with royal blood. His tone was full of mockery and bewilderment, as if he could not believe in such a possibility. Pointing his finger at the count's son, the emperor sternly ordered him to answer why he did not love his bride in bed, and his voice sounded with obvious condemnation, as if he could not understand how one could neglect such an important part of married life. Closing his eyes, Eric began to deny that he had in any way attempted to dissolve the marriage with the princess through the priests. his words sounding with deep emotion and sincerity, as if he really wanted to prove his loyalty. Turning and beginning to circle the young man, the ruler added that he had insulted him by holding the wedding in Clayton's house, emphasizing that such a choice of location was unacceptable and showed a clear disregard for tradition and respect for the royal family. Miesa continued to lie on the floor, making animal sounds, and in her voice there was a wild, desperate cry, as if she was trying to express her pain and fear that overwhelmed her, plunging her into the abyss of madness. Suddenly the emperor stopped, his face lit up with cold anger hidden behind a mask of indifference, and he wondered if this event was the beginning of a rebellion against the royal family that had long ruled the country. Eric couldn't hide his shocked expression, which slowly began to fill with deep horror and indescribable fear, causing his tender and big heart to beat. His hands, clad in snow-white gloves, clenched into fists, trembling with tension and excitement, as if trying to suppress the growing excitement and anxiety, which with each passing moment became more and more unbearable. As soon as the king mentioned the rebellion, the man suddenly remembered his family, and his heart was filled with anxiety. He began to worry not about his own fate, but about the well-being of his loved ones who might be in danger. Biting his lip with tension, Eric realized that the 17 knights he had brought with him to the capital were not enough to confront the ruler and his numerous guards. Inner fear and anxiety tormented the boy. The hand stretched out in the air and waved smoothly, calling her sister to it, as if it wanted to build a bridge between them and envelop her in gentle care and warmth in this anxious moment. Miesa obediently pressed herself to the ground and crouched down towards her brother, her large eyes shining with anticipation and care, as if she felt that he needed her support in this difficult. The ruler gently placed his hand on his relative's head and asked her to answer all the questions asked honestly, hoping that it was sincerity that would help clarify the confusing situation and restore trust between them. The handsome man, with a slight mockery on his lips, turned to the girl with a question, wondering whether his own husband undressed at night. He was trying to lead her into a frank conversation about the secrets that could be hidden in a woman's life. Miesa opened her mouth, but the words stuck on her tongue as she stared at her brother's shoes, mesmerized, unable to give a clear answer to his question, and also caught up in her own thoughts and emotions. The man repeated his question angrily, while Eric, deeply troubled, feared for the health of his wife and for the emperor's cruel behavior, which was becoming more and more obvious and threatening. The girl could not hold back her tears and, sobbing, squealed that she was in pain. Her voice trembled from emotion, and her eyes were filled with bitterness and despair, reflecting the full weight of her suffering. The concubine, who was waiting for her patron, froze in surprise, not expecting that the princess, who had dark hair flowing like silk and blue eyes like the surface of the sea, could speak. Eric also froze in place, hearing the words spoken by his wife for the first time, and a deep emotion stirred in his heart, because these words were filled with unbearable pain and suffering, which reflected the full weight of mental anguish. Pointing to her stomach and what was below, the lady firmly stated that it was there that she was in pain, and the woman's voice trembled with tension, and her face showed anxiety and fear. The two men froze in anticipation as the emperor, clearly not expecting such an answer, froze. The man's face changed, and a mixture of surprise and bewilderment flashed in his eyes. The man was faced with an unexpected reality. Eric himself was also shocked, as he had never touched his wife in that place, and suddenly, hearing such words from his beloved, he felt his heart squeeze from an unexpected feeling of anxiety and worry. The king rose to his feet in a rage and, turning to his sister, ordered her to stop immediately. His loud voice sounded angry and commanding, as if he wanted to show that he would not tolerate disobedience. The man, grimacing in disgust, said that he was disgusted to hear about his own sister's love affairs, adding that it had spoiled his mood, as if her revelations had plunged him into an endless abyss of discontent. He abruptly pushed the beauty away from him with his foot, and her golden hair, flowing like sunbeams, began to flutter in the air, creating an effect of lightness and almost magic around her, despite the rudeness of his actions. Eric grabbed the girl by the shoulders with concern, trying to help her up. His eyes expressed genuine concern because he couldn't leave her in this state and wanted to make sure that she was safe. Grasping her by the back of the head and hugging her around the waist, the man pressed the princess to himself, wanting to protect her from everything that could cause pain, as if he was trying to create a strong defense around her from the hardships and dangers of this. His teeth clenched tightly in anger at the impudent and cruel ruler, who not only oppressed his subjects, but also neglected their feelings, causing a storm of indignation in the man's heart and a desire to take revenge for all the suffering he had endured. The two of them sat away from the emperor, who had finally decided to leave them alone, and in the silence that surrounded them, they could allow themselves to relax, although thoughts of the past still troubled their minds. The carriage drove slowly back to Clauden's house, and the coachman confidently led the horses, clattering their hooves on the pavement and leaving behind a cloud of dust, as if conveying an atmosphere of calm after a stormy meeting. Inside the carriage sat Eric, holding the princess tightly in his arms, her head bowed against his shoulder, her face expressing weariness and relief. The girl had found refuge in his arms, protecting herself from the worries of the outside world. Misa fell asleep from exhaustion, snuggled up to Eric's warm body. Her feminine breathing became even and calm, and her face became peaceful. In his arms, she found the comfort and security she needed to rest. Soon, the familiar home appeared on the horizon, enveloped in the evening light, and an atmosphere of calm and comfort hung in the air, foreshadowing the end of a long day and the opportunity to finally relax within my beloved walls. The butler and his servants were waiting for their master to return, and when they saw him unharmed, they breathed a sigh of relief, happy that he had returned home safely and had avoided the dangers that might have befallen him on the way. The servants stared in surprise at the sleeping mistress, who was gently nestled in the arms of the guy, who confidently declared that he himself was capable of taking care of the lady, his voice sounding After that, Eric firmly ordered everyone that no one dared to enter the second floor of the West Wing, and his voice sounded confident and authoritative. The guy set boundaries that no one would dare cross in his absence. The maids overheard the conversation, and the words that the master's chambers would now be guarded by knights reached their ears, causing surprise and curiosity in them, because such attention to security promised many changes. The servants' faces twisted in surprise and disbelief as they realized that the princess would now be watched even more carefully, which added new worries and obligations, making them wonder what changes awaited them in the future. A large, long staircase led upward, and in the air there were quiet conversations like whispers filling the space, giving the whole event an atmosphere of mystery and anticipation. Suddenly, Miesa jumped up, screaming in a loud voice that ants were crawling around her, which she was terribly afraid of, and horror was visible in her eyes. The girl found herself in the center of a real nightmare, which made everyone around freeze in anticipation of her reaction. The girl struggled and hugged her husband tightly, swinging her legs furiously. The shoes threatened to fall off her fragile, thin legs, creating the feeling that they were about to disappear, and the lady was ready to fight her fears, even if it meant losing something important. Cullen, a grown man with a face scarred with scars, confidently put his hands behind his back and came at his master's call, ready to carry out any order. His masculine appearance inspired respect and trust, emphasizing loyalty and steadfastness. Eric repeated his order, sternly stating that the knight was not to allow anyone onto the second floor and was required to report any violations immediately. His voice was authoritative and confident, emphasizing the importance of maintaining order. Nodding obediently, Cullen agreed and remained standing at the door, ready to guard his master, his attention focused on the surroundings, as if he were a living wall, ready to defend at any moment. Miesa fell onto the bed with a dull thud, wincing in pain and fatigue, her body accepting the soft bed, and she closed her eyes for a moment, trying to get rid of the overwhelming worries and anxieties that tormented her mind. The beauty's face changed the moment Eric asked if she was going to start screaming or crying, and her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. Internal contradictions tormented her, forcing her to think. Coming closer, the future count said in a cold tone that no one would come to her aid, and his words sounded threatening and confident, as if he deliberately wanted to emphasize her vulnerability and defenselessness, leaving her only hope in her own strength. Soon he climbed onto the bed and leaned directly over her, trapping the princess in a grip and giving her no escape route, his presence creating a feeling of irresistible power, as if she was a prisoner of her own fears. Eric demanded that his wife utter at least one word, now that it was known that the princess could speak. His voice was insistent, as if hoping that a woman's words could break the silence and return them to normalcy. Sweat was running down the woman's face, and Miesa looked at her husband with confused eyes, her gaze showing anxiety and bewilderment. What was happening around her turned into an endless stream of emotions that did not give her peace and did not allow her to find clarity. Her teeth clenched tightly in determination, reflecting her inner strength and desire to overcome her fears, filling her with confidence that despite the circumstances, she was able to defend her interests and not give in under pressure. But instead of saying clear and understandable words, she just smiled tensely, closing her eyes, as if trying to hide her true feelings. The man's hand squeezed the woman's tightly, expressing warm confidence and support, as if to show that he was ready to wait for an answer from her for as long as it took, without showing the slightest impatience. As Eric was about to ask his wife about her true feelings for him, he was suddenly interrupted and froze, realizing that at that moment his words had not been spoken. Miesa interrupted the guy, quoting another man who once said that he didn't pay attention to the princess, thinking she was stupid and acting. With a gentle smile, full of warmth and sincere love, the lady looked at her husband, as if trying to convey to him all her devotion and support in this moment filled with deep feelings and mutual understanding. The handsome man remained frozen, like a statue, looking down at his bride and not believing his ears that Miesa had finally spoken to him, saying the words that the guy had been waiting and hoping to hear for so long. When asked why she had not spoken up before, the princess turned away and recalled the words of her mother, who had said that they would be like hyenas looking for meat, and therefore they should behave with dignity and respect. Despite the sweet and relaxed expression on the beauty's face, she spoke in strange phrases that had previously been spoken by complete strangers, and she clearly had a good memory, allowing her to reproduce their words with amazing accuracy. The man's hand began to shake as he shook the lady's, who continued to squeeze it tightly, as if trying to convey confidence and support to him in this tense moment. Turning away from his beloved, he muttered that he had in no way wanted to pressure or threaten her, trying to explain his true intentions and get rid of the feeling of guilt that had overwhelmed him at that moment. Blood slowly trickled down the sword, staining it a deep red, as if reminding him of what had happened in that troubling moment when the tip had crossed the line between life and death. It was rumored that when the princess was 8 years old, she witnessed the death of her mother, and later her grief was only compounded by the loss of her half-siblings, who were killed by their own brother, leaving a deep mark on her soul. That is why Miesa, in order to survive, chose a different path, to play the role of a madwoman, enduring ridicule and contemptuous glances from others, hoping in this way to avoid unnecessary attention and keep her secret. Other people pointed fingers at her and treated her like an animal, showing complete disregard and disrespect, which only increased her feelings of isolation and fear of the world around. However, Misa continued to laugh loudly with tears in her eyes, slowly going mad in reality. The laughter became more and more insane and distorted, reflecting the deep pain and suffering that she tried to hide behind the outer mask. Eric didn't know what to say when he learned the truth about his wife's difficult past, and he didn't know how to provide her with the necessary support during this difficult moment when his own feelings and thoughts were in chaos. The hand was clenched tightly on his knees, as if seeking support in this tense moment when feelings were mixed with anxiety and worry. The princess, covered with a warm blanket, slept soundly, immersed in a world of sweet dreams, where magical adventures and vivid images awaited her, far from the worries of real life. The servants and the butler entered the chambers, asking the young master if the lady had woken up yet, with the hope that the morning's chores could begin and the peace of the day would not be disturbed. The green-eyed maid with a noticeable mole cast a cold glance at the sleeping princess, expressing displeasure and disdain, as if her presence in this place was only an annoyance. Eric was awake and sitting on the sofa, deep in thought, while the servants went inside to begin their household duties, filling the house with life and care. The maids carefully approached the princess to gently wake her up and offer her a delicious breakfast, prepared with love, a morning treat that would help her gain strength and energy for the upcoming day full of important affairs. The servants were stopped by the order of the master, who said that the lady was very tired after a long journey and could sleep a little longer. He expressed concern for her and earnestly asked her not to disturb her so that she could regain her strength. The courtiers had no choice but to silently agree with the master's decision. The butler insistently suggested that the master begin to perform his duties first, as he still had much work ahead that required attention. The breakfast was varied and appetizing. Fresh vegetables, aromatic meats, and other treats were beautifully laid out on the plate. Each dish looked so that it made you want to try it immediately, creating a festive atmosphere for the taste buds. The man sat down at his workstation to begin eating. He happily laid out his breakfast in front of him and, taking up his utensils, concentrated on each bite, enjoying the tastes and aromas that awakened his appetite. Eating in monotony brought dissatisfaction and resembled sand, causing neither joy nor inspiration. Grabbing a piece of steak with his fork, the man brought it to his mouth with disappointment, hoping that at least this piece would give at least some pleasure. On this beautiful day, when the sun was shining brightly and a gentle breeze was playing with the leaves of the trees, the nature around the mansion filled the air with freshness and tranquility, creating an atmosphere of magic. Suddenly, with a loud crash, plates of food, glasses, and cutlery were thrown off the table, creating noisy chaos and scattering food all over the room. The unexpected incident filled the atmosphere with tension. The young lady's to-do list only included a few tasks, one of which was to make a real mess on the table, destroying all the prepared dishes and causing the maids to run around in a panic, trying to deal with the consequences of her pranks. After the pranks, the young lady was simply obliged to untie the black-haired man's cloak with her teeth, showing all her courage and mischief. This action, filled with a playful spirit, added a touch of adventure and fun to her day. Misa then, in her mischievous mood, decided to pull out the white hair of the maid who, frightened and not expecting such an act, screamed in pain. The unexpected act added chaos to the already unstable atmosphere. For her last misbehavior, the lady received a sharp blow to the forehead, which immediately swelled and became very painful. The punishment made her realize that pranks can have serious consequences and caused a feeling of shame for her actions. The courtiers did not understand the behavior of their princess and, observing her strange antics, began to consider her an idiot, which only exacerbated the tension in palace life. However, Misa was very afraid that someone would tell everyone her secret, especially considering that yesterday he was furious and very angry with her, which made her anxious and worried about the consequences. The woman's hand clutched the hem of her dress in concern, reflecting the woman's anxiety and inner experiences that were growing with each passing minute. The movement betrayed the doubts and fears that she was trying to hide from those around her. The girl was afraid that, having learned her secret, everyone would lock the beauty up within four walls again, not allowing her to walk around freely and enjoy life, which caused a deep feeling of anxiety and despair in her. Or, even worse, the princess would be thrown out of the house, leaving her without support and protection, which would only increase her fears and uncertainty about the future, forcing her to think about how she would cope with life outside the palace. Miesa nodded her head, resolutely refusing to think about the bad, and tried to focus on more joyful thoughts to dispel her worries and fears. Despite his past evil behavior, the handsome man had previously treated her with kindness and care, and these memories made her hope that he could change his attitude and become her ally again. Misa blushed at the memory of the young master, his kind look and warm words that left a tender feeling and hope for the best in her fragile heart. And after that, without thinking twice, she rushed to run along the corridors of the mansion, feeling how adrenaline filled the beauty's body and spurred her desire for freedom and adventure. In the hall, a beautiful mother was already waiting, smiling and holding important documents in her hands, which gave the lovely girl strength and confidence that everything would be fine. Seeing the sweet girl in front of her, the lady kindly remarked that she should not walk alone without the support of her maids, as this could be dangerous to her safety and well-being. Suddenly, Miesa fell to her knees in front of her mother, wanting to receive from her at least a drop of warmth and love that could dispel her worries and fears in this difficult moment. The woman gently placed her hand on the beauty's head, and from this gesture she sighed in relief, experiencing sudden relief and warmth that enveloped her like a protective cover. The palace woman ordered her report to continue, raising her voice confidently to attract the attention of those present and refocus them on the important issues that needed to be discussed. The man recalled that the gentleman wanted to repair the garden fence, and he had to study all possible resources necessary for the task to ensure a quality result and satisfaction of all requirements. Majo wood seemed like a great option as it offered quality material at a reasonable price, making it an ideal choice for garden fencing renovation. The name of this wood seemed familiar to the princess, and intrigued, the girl opened her eyes, ready to learn more about the material that could be useful for her plans. The palace garden used a different tree, brought from the southern border, which was distinguished by its quality and durability, making it ideal for shaping and protecting the surrounding area. However, it was significantly more expensive, almost 5 times, which called into question the feasibility of using this material to repair the fence, given the project budget. The beauty herself wondered whether the Cladden family was really so poor that they couldn't afford to buy more expensive materials, since their status and wealth usually meant better conditions. The butler then grabbed a plate of butter produced at the dairy farm and milk that was also brought from there, assuring everyone that the products were of high quality and freshness. It was expensive and of good quality, and then the servants brought the food to their mistress so that she could taste some, enjoying the exquisite tastes and aromas. Intrigued, Thales carefully scooped up some of the butter with her fingertip, tasting it, eager to try the delicacy and enjoying its velvety texture, imagining how it would perfectly complement her favorite dishes. Misa, in complete shock, opened her mouth, because for her, who grew up in a castle, the sum of 20 coins for butter seemed insignificant and completely insignificant. The woman tossed a piece of food into the princess's mouth so that she too could taste the oil and enjoy its rich aroma, which delighted them both so much, creating an atmosphere of joy and unity in their little culinary. It was astonishing to realize that such a small piece of butter was worth as much as an entire sack of flour, and it only emphasized how valuable quality food could be, especially in their world where every coin mattered. Misa couldn't help but recall her husband's worries about not having enough food for all the people he was responsible for, and this reminder of his worries only increased her anxiety about the cost of food and its availability. The mother, smiling broadly, hoped that the princess liked the butter, and planned to buy her as many as 5 pieces to please her with this exquisite delicacy and make her days brighter and more delightful. The lady herself did not understand why strangers were showing her such kindness, and she felt strange in this situation, not knowing how to properly respond to their generosity and attention. In her world, in the palace, no one, not her brothers, not her maids, would show even a drop of love or interest in her, would help or care, which made the acts of kindness from strangers especially surprising and touching. Evening had come, and the Cladden home was quiet and calm, creating a peaceful atmosphere in which everyone could reflect on the day and enjoy the comfort of the home. Eric stretched his arms forward, inviting his wife to come closer to him. His face glowed with a sincere smile, full of tenderness and anticipation, creating a picture of warmth and comfort in their little world, where every moment was filled with love and mutual understanding. However, Misa did not want to tear herself away from the Count's mother's knees and stubbornly refused to go into her husband's arms, feeling how excitement and fear overwhelmed her and hoping for the support and protection of her loved one. Whining sadly, she did not want to spend time with the man who knew the lady's secret and was afraid of the possible consequences of his discoveries, preferring to hide in familiar and safe surroundings. However, suddenly strong hands grabbed the girl by the waist, lifting her off the floor and pressing her to him, causing her tender heart to beat faster from surprise and mixed emotions that she could not ignore. However, suddenly, strong hands grabbed the girl by the waist, lifting her off the floor and pressing her to himself, causing her heart to beat faster from surprise and overwhelming emotions that the lady could not ignore, despite her fear. Quietly, the aristocrat whispered to the beauty that it would be better if she behaved calmly, as before, so as not to attract unnecessary attention, because this would help to avoid unnecessary problems and keep their secrets safe. The beauty's face became surprised when the guy promised that he would keep their secret a secret, and this unexpected assurance added confidence to her, although deep down she was still afraid of the possible consequences. The moon shone high overhead, illuminating the pristine leaves of the trees, which shimmered in its soft light, creating a magical atmosphere of the night and emphasizing the beauty of the surrounding world. The dinner featured a variety of dishes including tender meats and flavorful lobster with exquisite sauces and side dishes, creating a true culinary feast for guests. Eric asked the princess if she could now eat on her own using cutlery, with a hint of humor in his voice, wanting to know how she was coping with her new responsibilities and studying at the table. Misa sat silently, holding a knife in one hand and a fork in the other, and looked ahead with an emotionless gaze, as if immersed in her thoughts, not noticing the world around her. Sitting in his company, the beautiful Miesa was once again convinced that she did not like this strange, dark-haired guy opposite her at all, and the feeling of his presence made her feel awkward and irritated. Even when he ate, he looked too formal, as if he was playing some role, while the servants in this house were not that efficient and did not inspire confidence, which added even more tension to the atmosphere. Misa preferred to eat with her hands, enjoying the naturalness of this process, but everyone around her insistently ordered her to use utensils, which she really didn't like and caused a feeling of discomfort. With trembling hands, she tried to cut the meat, because the beauty had not used a spoon or fork for more than 10 years, and this added to her nervousness, making her feel awkward at the table. Eric complimented his wife on how well she was eating on her own, with a kind smile, acknowledging her efforts and creating a more relaxed atmosphere at the table. The noblewoman stared at her husband with irritation, not understanding what he meant by the word good, and this added even more tension to her mood, forcing her to think about what was hidden behind this compliment. Throwing her hand to the side, the girl deliberately dropped the fork on the floor, trying to get rid of this unnecessary tool that no longer corresponded to the plan. After this, the princess began to greedily grab food with her hands and stuff everything that was on her plate into her mouth, as if she was afraid that this delicacy would disappear. Eric was shocked by this reaction and could not understand what exactly happened, what made the girl behave like this and get angry. He watched her in bewilderment, trying to unravel the mystery of the woman's mood. The girl began to lick the sauce off her hand when she suddenly noticed that her companion had covered his face with his hand. This gesture surprised the lady and made her wonder what could have embarrassed him so much. Eric, flushed with embarrassment, stopped eating and tried not to look at his wife, who was behaving so provocatively, making him feel awkward and confused. Miesa stopped licking the delicious sauce and stared in surprise at the man who was blushing like a tomato, afraid that his bright embarrassment meant that he was angry with her. Eric, overcoming his own embarrassment, stood up from his seat, walked over to the princess and sat down next to her, trying to support her in this awkward moment and understand what was really going on. He carefully tied the napkin with his hand, while Misa, sitting next to him, tried to remind herself that she should keep her emotions under control and not give in to her feelings. Suddenly a man's hand grabbed the lady by the cheeks and, in a voice full of authority, ordered her to turn to face the count, leaving everyone perplexed by such an unexpected turn of events. Eric held the tissue up to the woman's face and, trying to be as gentle as possible, began to gently wipe away the dirt, carefully cleaning her skin of any traces to restore her feeling of freshness and confidence. After this, the man asked the lady to extend her hand to him and, showing concern, began to carefully wipe it from dirt, giving this gesture tenderness and attention, which helped to diffuse the tense atmosphere. Miesa looked away sheepishly, embarrassed by her earlier foolish behavior, and felt her cheeks flush with the awkwardness of drawing attention to herself. The maids worked diligently to clear up the mess left by dinner, wiping the table and moving the chairs, giving the room a neat appearance and restoring an atmosphere of coziness and comfort. The nobleman, leaning against the wall next to the open door, carefully watched what was happening in the hall, immersed in his thoughts and enjoying what was happening around him. Miesa cringed as the maid poured cold water on her, trying to get rid of the dirt, as if wanting to punish this stupid princess for her strange and unusual behavior. The royal's female hands grabbed her rival's hair tightly and pulled her forward, causing the woman to let out a loud scream, filled with horror and surprise at such a cruel act. The servant's face was distorted with anger, and the veins on her neck and arms bulged with rage, emphasizing her suppressed sense of injustice and readiness to fight back. The maid, unable to bear the humiliation, suddenly grabbed her mistress's face, striking back, full of rage and determination not to remain on the sidelines of this injustice that had turned the whole order upside down. But suddenly they were interrupted by the loud voice of a man who heard the noise from the bathroom and therefore came to check on his beloved wife, who could have accidentally hurt herself. The maid with the mole on her face explained with a grin that the princess had started to act up, and so they had to use force to calm the girl down and bring the situation back under control. Miesa frowned as she heard such a ridiculous lie coming from the lips of the shameless maid, and all the words spoken were full of senseless accusations and slander. The aristocrat, turning to his wife, declared bitterly that he was leaving since he himself had intended to help her with her bath, but now felt compelled to leave her at that moment. The woman spread her arms wide, declaring that the gentleman should not worry about such trifles. It was difficult and inconvenient enough for her to wash the lady, since she constantly resisted, showing an unwillingness to submit. However, Eric was persistent, and so the maid pointed to the colorful bottles that contained shampoo, scented hair oil, and other soapy accessories necessary for grooming. Miesa frowned again at the lie, because, as a rule, the maid only roughly washed the princess's entire body with simple soap, without any concern for the proper care and comfort that she so needed. Sometimes she was grabbed by the hair so hard that she could not break free, and was forced to endure rough and painful movements all over her body, while getting her golden hair wet, which was extremely unpleasant and humiliating for her. Before leaving, the maid cast a distrustful glance at the gentleman, who was still standing patiently next to his wife, showing no interest in what was happening. The old maid turned around awkwardly, not daring to look at the princess's almost naked body. Eric, watching what was happening, asked his wife if she could wash herself, because he did not want to interfere in this awkward moment. The lady, struck by such an unexpected situation, froze in place, not expecting that the man would allow a crazy woman like her to wash herself, considering this something completely impossible and even absurd. Red with embarrassment, the guy realized that the lady actually refused to wash herself, and she needed his help to overcome the awkwardness of this situation. Not wanting to anger her husband again and get on his nerves, the beauty stood up and walked towards him, trying to demonstrate her willingness to cooperate and her determination to resolve the situation positively. Eric immediately covered his face with his hand in embarrassment, trying to hide his emotions and not wanting to see what, in his opinion, absolutely should not be happening at this moment in order to avoid even more awkwardness. However, he immediately replaced his embarrassment with horror when he saw the scars on his wife's thighs and legs from the spanking, realizing what pain and suffering she had been forced to endure, and his heart sank with bitterness. Immediately becoming serious and cold, the man looked in horror at the wounded body of his bride, and, feeling how anger and hatred filled his soul, he was determined to get even with the offender who caused her such pain. The princess's face was filled with fear, for she was afraid that she might somehow offend her husband, and this filled her with anxiety, like the shadow of impending danger. The image of her brother waving a whip and smiling cruelly came into her mind, and the image filled her heart with cold and horror, making her tremble with the memory of the cruelty. Pressing her hands to her chest, the beauty began to slowly retreat back, as if instinctively wanting to hide from the growing tension and danger that surrounded her at that moment. The man, possessing impressive dimensions, seemed like a huge and gloomy mountain hanging over the woman's miniature figure, causing a feeling of horror and helplessness. The noblewoman could no longer bear his gaze and, turning away, fell to her knees, hugging herself with her arms, full of fear of the possible pain that was ready to fall upon her. However, instead of the expected fear, the man's hand only gently touched the scars on the woman's back, and this touch felt like a light touch of a feather, causing an extraordinary warmth and tenderness. Concerned, Eric couldn't help but worry about how serious the wound was that it left such a deep and noticeable mark after healing, reminding him of painful events from the past. Kratka decided not to lie and openly answered that this scar was a trace of the king's blow, which forever left an imprint not only on the body but also in the depths of the soul, reminding of the grief and suffering. The aristocrat's face became surprised, and he could not believe that a man capable of such atrocities could inflict such a deep wound on his own sister and cause such indescribable pain. The nobleman sighed heavily and covered his face with his hand, sinking into complete confusion, unable to comprehend what was happening and understand how such pain could have been caused. Wanting to finish bathing the royal person as quickly as possible, he carefully placed the girl in the bath, and the water, spilling over the edge, began to pour out of the bath, streaming and falling onto the floor, creating small puddles. Rolling up his sleeves, Eric began to help the maiden wash herself with care, asking her to warn him if she suddenly felt uncomfortable so that he could pay due attention to the lady's feelings and ensure maximum comfort during this process. Taking one of the jars in his hands, he added with a slight smile that it was the first time he was washing another person, feeling excitement and an unusual sense of responsibility for this care. The beauty closed her eyes from the gentle touches to her head, enjoying every movement of the hands and the gentle feelings that enveloped the girl, bringing calm and peace. Not only did the guy's cheeks turn red, but his hands, which he held the washcloth with and gently washed his wife's skin, were filled with warmth and embarrassment from the closeness and care that the guy gave. The lady's face and lips trembled as she struggled to contain her laughter at the touches in sensitive places that were causing her mixed feelings and excitement. Without holding back, she burst into laughter, filling the room with joy, and then, embarrassed and slightly flushed, she stared at the man who treated her with such kindness and care. Noticing the intense gaze on himself, Eric looked away, blushing from his ears to his neck, and, embarrassedly reaching for his neck, he soon apologized, feeling awkward from such attention. The exhausted nobleman fell back onto the pillow for a moment, tired after a long day and his lovely lady's bath, feeling his body finally relax in the soft embrace of the bed. Misa sat down next to him on the bed, looking closely at her exhausted husband. The room was gradually growing darker as night fell, enveloping them in an atmosphere of comfort and tranquility. The man, confidently grabbing the girl by the hand, pulled her towards him onto the soft blanket and gently said that it was time for rest and a peaceful sleep, because the night had already come. Misa thought that if anyone in this couple deserved a rest, it was not her, but the handsome man, because it was he who had clearly spent much more effort and energy on fulfilling his duties. Quite quickly, the aristocrat fell asleep, and the man's face suddenly became relaxed, as if all the tension and worries had disappeared, giving way to a peaceful sleep. Remembering all the events that had happened, the girl sincerely did not understand her companion, who was sometimes angry with her and sometimes washed and stroked her scars with amazing care, as if experiencing internal contradictions. Intrigued, Miesa approached the sleeping boy, looking at him closely and trying to understand the sincere feelings and thoughts hidden behind his calm face. But soon she left, leaving the nobleman alone in the bed. The lady was nowhere in the room, only a crumpled sheet testified to her recent presence, and the moonlight from the window softly illuminated the space. Miesa walked barefoot to the door and, quietly opening it, walked out into the corridor, leaving behind the silence of the room, which was filled only with the soft light of the moon penetrating through the curtains. Eric, as if waiting for this moment, opened his eyes, stopping pretending to be asleep, and carefully watched Misa leave the room, his gaze showing slight surprise and interest. Hearing strange sounds, the boy got out of bed and headed towards the light that was peeking out from the slightly open door, his curiosity growing with every step. From afar, secretly, he watched the princess, who stood frozen in front of the mirror and repeated phrases she had heard from others. This time, she was quoting the Count's mother, who had asked Adele to bring medicine. The boy's mouth dropped open in surprise. The noblewoman herself continued to mumble, mentioning that the price of medicine had increased by a few coins, and her words sounded as if she was genuinely concerned about the well-being of her family. Suddenly, the beauty froze with her mouth open, noticing that she was not alone in the reflection of the mirror. Her husband was standing behind her, and his presence suddenly changed the atmosphere, filling it with tension and curiosity. After which, with a cold expression on her face, she firmly spoke, addressing the Count as if he were her dear one, adding that Misa was practicing, and asked him not to tell anyone about it, emphasizing the importance of secrecy of this moment. The maids looked at their mistress's body, realizing that she had remained untouched and innocent until now, since her husband had never touched her body, which caused mixed feelings in them, from surprise to slight relief. The beauty lay on the bed, her eyes closed and trying to endure all the humiliations that the maids did to her, checking her pelvis for virginity, and every touch caused her deep pain. The servants were both surprised and outraged that the Count had not spent the night with his wife, even though she was crazy, behaving like a stupid animal, because many expected him to show at least a drop of care for her. A fellow servant muttered with a cheerful expression that they had been ordered to monitor the princess's condition and report if she suddenly became pregnant, adding a note of irony to her words, as if that was more important than anything else. The girl staggered to her feet and began to slowly walk forward down the corridor barefoot, feeling her feet touch the soft red carpets, each step giving her confidence despite her inner turmoil. As she walked, the beauty wondered whether she should hurt herself on something or break a vase that was standing nearby in order to attract attention to herself. It seemed to her that such an act could arouse the interest and concern of those around her. The beauty instantly shook her head, realizing that it was not worth breaking things in such a poor family, who bought even cheap items with difficulty, and she felt ashamed of her thoughts. Noticing a tall staircase, Misa decided to stop at a small break to catch her breath and collect her thoughts, because there were still many steps to her destination. The maid walking behind yawned tiredly and clearly wanted to sleep, but she had an important mission: to follow the princess everywhere and carefully watch her actions, despite her own fatigue. The girl began to climb the steps, internally preparing herself for a fall, even realizing that after that, her legs would hurt a lot, but at that moment it seemed to her that this would be the only way to get rid of the Suddenly, a hand quickly darted towards the girl, and the person standing next to her could no longer calmly watch the steps of the stupid princess, feeling that carelessness could lead to serious consequences. Eric grabbed his wife by the waist, preventing her from falling and giving her the confidence to lean on herself again, and his strong arms seemed to promise protection from all harm. Annoyed, Misa twisted her face, angry at the man who had ruined all her plans, trying to break free from the man's strong grip, as if his concern only made her worry worse. The couple made themselves comfortable on a bench in the greenhouse where birds used to live, but now they were removed so that Miesa would no longer be afraid of them and could calmly enjoy the atmosphere of this beautiful place. The lady, with a slight smile and a calm voice, confirmed that she really did not like birds because they frightened her with their unexpected splashes and sharp sounds that disturbed her peaceful rest. She played with her hands thoughtfully, interlacing her fingers and moving them in rhythmic movements, as if seeking inspiration for new thoughts. The man asked in surprise about the reason for such a strong hatred towards small feathered creatures, not understanding what could cause such negative feelings towards harmless birds. Briefly, the beauty answered that the birds had once eaten something from her, and then she frowned, angry at the aristocrat who constantly led her where he wanted, without asking anyone else's opinion. Eric, noticing his interlocutor's confusion, hastened to calm her down, assuring her that no one would come in here without permission, and she could speak freely without fear of unexpected visitors. The lady's eyes widened in surprise when the nobleman, as if reading her thoughts, asked with interest whether it was difficult for her to talk in such a tense situation. Flowers spread around them, smelling pleasantly of freshness, and an arch of greenery towered overhead, creating a cozy atmosphere and complementing this picturesque. The nobleman extended his hand forward with concern, palm up, offering her support and the opportunity to use his help in this cozy corner of nature. He wondered out loud that perhaps she had simply forgotten how to speak after so long in silence and isolation without someone to talk to and inspire her to express her thoughts openly. The maiden awkwardly looked away, never having thought about the reasons for her silence before, and felt her heart pound with embarrassment, realizing that the silence could be caused by internal fears and uncertainty. When he said that she was good at repeating other people's words, Miesa began to nod actively, although the man liked it better when, instead of gestures, the lady responded with words that reflected her true thoughts and feelings. Closing her eyes, the girl briefly replied that she understood, unable to resist such a temptation, pointing to a gray building located on the street opposite. Instantly, the young beauty covered her mouth with her hands, as if afraid of her own words, which could reveal the deep thoughts and feelings hidden deep inside. Blushing with embarrassment, she realized that her voice sounded rather strange and felt awkward, realizing how much her words could affect the impression of her. Eric was there, as always, to support and encourage her, assuring her that the more the princess spoke, the easier it would become for her to open up her thoughts and feelings, freeing herself from awkwardness. He tenderly embraced the fragile woman's wrist with his large hand, as if wanting to let her know that there was support and protection nearby, and the girl should not be afraid to open up. After which he offered her hand to his throat and began to show her how to speak correctly, slowly making sounds so that the beauty could understand how to express her thoughts and feelings with confidence and clarity. The first sound was accompanied by an explanation that the larynx was located here, and when she laughed, its pitch depended on the lady's mood and emotions, creating a unique melody reflecting the inner world. The beauty listened to the explanations, fascinated, her mouth slightly open and trying to repeat after her teacher, attentively listening to every word, as if it were the key to her inner transformation. The guy smiled as the lady, trying to repeat his instructions, slowly began to improve and understand how to speak correctly, and he saw how the woman's confidence gradually increased with each word. Next to her, Eric began to cough, awkwardly trying to hide his laughter, which greatly angered the princess, who pouted in offense, feeling that her efforts were becoming the subject of mild ridicule. Smiling broadly and covering his face with his hand, the aristocrat apologized to her for his reaction, sincerely repenting that his laughter could have offended her and hoping that she would understand his good intentions. He then explained that everyone's voice breaks and sounds strange at a certain age, adding that it is a natural part of growing up that everyone goes through, and that there is no need to be embarrassed about this phase. Their hands were close on the bench, barely touching each other, creating an atmosphere of tenderness and closeness, as if the invisible connection between them was becoming stronger. Wanting to find out something else from the count, Miesha remembered the maid's phrase, which said that the lady had still been untouched by her husband as a wife, and this memory made her feel awkward and confused. The man stared in surprise as the lady lifted her legs and showed them to him, spreading them apart as if to demonstrate her boldness and independence, which left him amazed at the unexpected turn of events. Instantly, the nobleman's face turned red, even his ears turned noticeably red, revealing his embarrassment and surprise at such a frank gesture from the lovely princess. With his hands, he tightly squeezed the lady's knees, not allowing her to spread them any further and show her cherished feminine place, trying to maintain an atmosphere of nobility and respect in this intimate moment. The lady persistently asked if he was going to confirm his marriage, otherwise she could at any moment be returned to the king, a cruel tyrant, which caused fear and anxiety in her soul for her own fate. Eric muttered that he needed more time to make a decision and claim his wife in bed, realizing the complexity and responsibility of this step, after which the man turned to the lady of his heart and suggested that they get to know each other better, assuring him that this would help him get rid of the discomfort arising from the ambiguity of their relationship and to more deeply understand her feelings and desires. Rising from his seat, Eric invited the lady to stroll around the greenhouse and enjoy the plants, hoping that this would help create a more relaxed atmosphere and ease the tension between them. Despite her doubts, Misa extended her elegant little hand, trusting Eric and hoping that a walk through the greenhouse would help her overcome her inner fears and feel more confident. The two of them walked forward slowly, enjoying each other's company and the silence of the greenhouse, where the smells of beautiful flowers and greenery created an atmosphere of comfort and tranquility. When asked if it was true that the princess was uncomfortable walking, Misa smiled slyly with a blush on her cheeks, as if hinting that perhaps awkwardness was just part of her charm and femininity. Amazed, Eric declared that the maiden had managed to fool them all by feigning an awkward gait, and now he was surprised to realize how cunningly and skillfully she hid her true grace. It was difficult for the lady to explain to her husband why she had to do this and pretend to be a fool, because the lady was afraid that frankness could ruin their relationship and cause mistrust between them. Without thinking twice, the beauty stretched her arms out in front of her and stopped, wanting to be picked up and carried, hoping in this way to express her fragility and desire to be protected. Eric gently picked up his wife in his arms and noticed that she had taken a long walk that day, which was something to be happy about, as it gave her freshness and energy, and their relationship was becoming stronger and stronger. Tired, Misa closed her eyes, intending to take a little nap. The Count was a much better man than she could have previously thought, and her heart was filled with warmth and gratitude that he was the one next to her. The day before the wedding, the woman in white sat in a chair, immersed in a book about lovers who touched lips and bodies, merging into one, and dreamed of how soon she herself would feel passion in the arms of her lover. The priestess in glasses read a book and told the story of how the first wedding night between a man and a woman took place, sharing details of their tender reunion and exciting moments full of passion and anticipation. Listening to the monotonous speech of the priestess, the princess understood that the wedding night would be strange and unpleasant, leaving behind not only emotional experiences, but also physical pain in the stomach, which caused her anxiety and bewilderment. But now, Misa understood that this was necessary to strengthen their marriage. Sitting on the bed, the lady hugged the pillow and watched her husband work with excitement, realizing that this was an important step in their life together. However, Eric constantly found various excuses and justifications to distract his wife from bed pleasures, which sometimes caused a feeling of discontent and misunderstanding, because she wanted to get closer to him and strengthen their connection. The man's hand trembled with the knife he was cutting meat with when the girl asked him when they would finally begin their marital duties, and he froze for a moment, realizing that this question was causing her to experience mixed feelings and anxiety. The girl's greatest fear was that the man would be upset and their relationship would shatter like fragile glass, forcing her to return to her cruel brother, whom she had so longed to leave. Eric called his wife's name when she fell silent without answering the question asked, and his voice sounded with a note of concern, reflecting a desire to understand her feelings and thoughts. Hugging the pillow, the beauty thought with horror that perhaps just being naked was not enough to arouse her husband, and this inspired fear that her attractiveness might not meet his expectations. The nobleman jumped up from his seat when the princess remained silent. Misa only thought that she had sunk into despair, not knowing how to cope with the fears and doubts that had fallen upon her. Living in this place with kind people, her mother, husband, and smiling servants gave her great pleasure, and therefore the beauty understood that she had to confirm the marriage as soon as possible in order to preserve this harmony. The lady felt here as if she had returned to her childhood when her mother was nearby, and other close people surrounded her with care and love, creating an atmosphere of comfort and tranquility. Eric shouted his wife's name loudly, and this woke her up from her reverie, returning her back to reality. where the girl could feel his care and presence. When asked about her health, the beauty only bowed her head down in disappointment, looking sadly at the floor, as if the words were stuck in her throat, not allowing her to express her true feeling. Feeling the warmth on her cheeks, she repeated the maid's phrase that hardly anyone would want to give their seed to someone like her, stupid and insecure. The surprised man, not believing his ears, persistently asked to repeat what was said, hoping that his doubts would be dispelled and that something other than sad words full of uncertainty and doubt would be heard. The surprised man, not believing his ears, persistently asked to repeat what was said, hoping that he would hear something other than sad words full of uncertainty and doubt, and that this did not reflect the true feelings of his beloved. Eric sat down next to his wife and began to repeat the old idea that they still didn't know enough about each other for such intimacy, reminding them that time and trust played an important role in their relationship. The lady hastened to remind her husband of his own words about the importance of getting to know each other better in order to get rid of discomfort, because this is what will help them establish harmony in their relationship. Eric was glad that his bride still listened to him from time to time and asked if she really wanted to confirm their marriage, hoping for her honest answer and further development of their relationship. He was delighted with her consent, but noted that he should also prepare for their night together, which caused the princess to be perplexed and even slightly indignant. The lady frowned, because she had once been told that people, even when trying their hand at bedtime for the first time, were capable of showing incredible abilities, while her husband was so stubbornly embarrassed. Sitting on the bed in his slippers, the aristocrat held a candle in his hands and spoke about how they had many unresolved issues, including details concerning the maids from the palace. The candlestick was carefully placed on the nightstand, and the soft light of the flame brightly illuminated the room, creating an atmosphere of coziness and warmth, as if dancing to the rhythm of a quiet evening, filling the space with playful shadows and delicate shades. Trying to calm his wife, the man's hand gently rested on the woman's clenched fists, which were tightly clutching the fabric beneath them, as if seeking support in this tense moment. Eric suggested sharing important information before going to bed so that they could collaborate together, strengthening their bond and creating an atmosphere of trust. Deciding to start with something simple, the guy asked his wife about her favorite food, hoping that this conversation would help them get to know each other better and open up new facets of their relationship. Lost in thought, the lady suddenly admitted that she loved meat, which surprised her husband, who had always believed that her preferences lay in the realm of sweets, and made him wonder how well he really knew his wife. In response, Eric stated that he preferred vegetables and fruits, explaining that on the battlefield he often ate tasteless and meager dry rations, and this left him with a strong desire for fresher and healthier food. When asked if she felt stuffy, the lovely lady thought for a moment and finally ordered the guy to stop asking questions, preferring solitude in her. Eric couldn't help but laugh when he heard the voice from the girl's lips that sounded like his mother's, which caused him to be slightly surprised and bring back tender memories of his childhood. After which, coughing slightly into his fist, the man added that he liked it when the girl called him by name and asked her to repeat it again, hoping to hear the familiar sound that brought joy. When Miesa obediently said his name, Eric gently hugged her cheek, feeling how the warmth of her skin filled his heart space with joy and tenderness. In response to her obedience, he tenderly gave her a chaste kiss on the forehead, expressing his love and care without unnecessary words, and at that moment, a feeling of warmth and trust hung in the air, as if an invisible connection had formed. A gentle and kind smile shone on the man's lips, reflecting his sincere feelings and willingness to take care of her, as if this simple facial expression could convey all his tenderness and support. Touching her forehead shyly, the girl felt for the first time a genuine interest in another person, and this new sensation filled her heart with trepidation and excitement. Since childhood, the beauty has been accustomed to wearing masks to fool others, hiding her true feelings and thoughts behind imaginary images created for protection and manipulation. The princess went to bed, and the guy was still sitting next to her on the bed, carefully examining his beloved, immersed in thoughts about her beauty and uniqueness. Now they lay next to each other, rather than on opposite sides of the bed, enjoying the closeness and quiet comfort that created a special atmosphere between them. Filling the room with tenderness and a sense of mutual understanding, Eric lay back on his pillow and closed his eyes, hoping to learn more about his wife in the near future, dreaming of how their relationship would deepen, revealing new facets of her personality and their life together. The next morning came, and the house was filled with the morning freshness. The birds were singing merrily, but suddenly a loud voice was heard calling the young master, interrupting this idyll. The boy walked forward with a quick step, having learned about the situation that had happened, and his heart began to beat faster from excitement and the desire to understand what was happening. Eric and his servants froze, listening to the rough voice that asked the other man why he was pretending to be innocent, creating tension in the air and arousing curiosity about what was really going on. The maids stood with their heads down and sweat streaming down their faces, betraying their excitement and tension at this difficult moment when they tried to remain invisible in the shadows of what was happening. Below, on the floor, in bandages and scarves, lay the princess, wounded and with her eyes closed, creating a feeling of anxiety and hopelessness, while around her reigned an atmosphere of tension and care. Eric stood frozen in shock, feeling the world around him collapse, falling into a chaos of worry and anxiety as he realized his lover's life was in danger. The sun was shining brightly, filtering through the window and curtains, creating a warm glow that filled the room with light and gave it a cozy atmosphere despite the disturbing events unfolding. The servants stood over their mistress, discussing how she had once again woken up innocent, and noted with bewilderment that the newlywed couple had still not touched each other. One of them noticed something strange and leaned even closer to the young lady, trying to examine the woman's condition and understand what could have caused such alarm. Frowning, the woman with the mole on her face thought that the lady had been acting strange lately, and her behavior was causing more and more concern and confusion. Miesa pulled her idiot mask back on and lay on the bed with a detached face, her mouth open and her eyes looking away blankly, as if her thoughts had wandered far away from this place and she no longer belonged to her. However, the maiden greedily absorbed all the information and rumors that the maids discussed, standing above her and thinking that no one could hear them, especially about the meeting with another family, and this inspired her with increasing curiosity and anxiety. The ladies roughly grabbed their mistress by the arms, insistently ordering her to get up, because it was time to change clothes, and their determination left no other choice. The lady herself bit her lip while no one was looking, feeling how anxiety was slowly but surely creeping up her throat, causing panic and making her heart beat faster. The green-eyed lady looked away and asked why the 3 pillars of the kingdom were in such a bad state, showing genuine concern about what was happening around them. The second woman with freckles said irritably that she herself did not know the answer, adding that she wanted to leave the Clayton mansion as soon as possible, feeling the growing tension in the air. Suddenly, the fragile princess made a strange sound, attracting attention, and all eyes immediately turned to her, full of anxiety and anticipation. She began to giggle strangely with a crazy look and an unnaturally wide smile on her face, causing everyone present to feel anxious and confused. The maids, carrying heavy baskets of sand, hoped that their mistress would like their gift, and their hearts were filled with excitement in anticipation of her reaction, as they tried to create something special to cheer her up. Suddenly, one of the maids asked another if she had heard anything strange, as if someone had screamed, filling the atmosphere with anxiety and wariness. Suddenly, a running figure appeared in front of them, running as fast as he could, and the orange fabric fluttered in the wind from the speed, creating a feeling of swiftness and surprise. It was a princess whose bare feet raised dust and whose arms, waving in different directions, frightened passers-by, creating an atmosphere of chaos and unpredictability. Like the wind, she swept past the servants, who were surprised but did not even have time to turn their heads, let alone stop their mistress, and a feeling of confusion and bewilderment hung in the air as everyone tried to comprehend what was happening. Moving as if her life depended on it, Miesa quickly looked for the stairs to complete her planned bone-breaking move, full of determination and fear of what awaited her. Suddenly, she spotted her target, as well as another maid who was coming upstairs carrying a heavy box, and that moment filled her with determination to act. Realizing that the stairs were occupied, the girl ran past and, continuing along the corridor, noticed an open door, where she headed, hoping to find an alternative route to her goal. There was a balcony there, and no one was there, which gave her the opportunity to stop for a moment and collect her thoughts, enjoying the fresh air and the feeling of freedom. Without thinking twice, the girl climbed onto the railing with her feet, feeling adrenaline and fear, because this was the only way to get closer to her goal and achieve her plan. Then she jumped forward as if she wanted to fly like a bird into the sky, and her bare feet left the ground. Delicate flower petals swirled in the air, creating a magical moment full of hope and courage. At that moment, she really did look like a madwoman, smiling widely and feeling completely free, as if the world around her had ceased to exist, leaving only her and this magical moment. Below, innocent yellow flowers were waiting, smelling pleasantly, spreading across the clearing and creating an atmosphere of harmony and tranquility, as if nature itself was calling the girl to freedom. Mother sat by the patient's bedside and sternly scolded the maids for failing to keep an eye on their mistress and allowing her to commit such a stupid act, expressing concern and disappointment at their inaction. Adele stood by while the mistress of the house scolded the maids for being lazy all day, but insisting on personally bathing and changing the emperor's sister, showing her pride and the importance of the task. The woman's moralizing and insults were interrupted by the voice of her son, who addressed his mother, adding tension to the atmosphere and causing everyone to freeze in anticipation of his words. Eric stood next to his mother, looking down at his wife, who lay unconscious from her injuries, his heart clenched with worry and a sense of hopelessness. The maids from the palace who had just been scolded shuddered in fear as they felt the young master's gaze full of anger and disappointment, and excitement quickly overwhelmed them, because they understood that the full weight of the consequences of what had happened would now fall on them. The guy, gently placing his hand on the body of his beloved, leaned over and began to check how many wounds the beauty had received. His heart sank with anxiety when he realized how much she had endured. Eric sternly ordered the girl standing next to the bed in a blue dress to be ready for inspection. The man's voice sounded confident and insistent, emphasizing the importance of the moment. This short girl's name was Gela, and she was one of the knights of the Zladen family. Frowning, she prepared to carry out her master's orders, determined to demonstrate her loyalty and valor. The man ordered a courtier to escort one of the palace maids to the emperor and at the same time inform the ruler of his sister's injuries, so that he would be aware of her condition. After receiving the count's order, the subjects bowed their heads obediently, and together with Adele, they were ready to set out to carry out his mission. Mother, muttering in frustration, noted that no one could have imagined how difficult and stupid it was to follow the plans of idiots, because every action they took only complicated the situation, causing them to feel bewildered and irritated. With an evil smile, the woman added that these madmen who had failed to keep an eye on their poor mistress should have their limbs amputated for their negligence and carelessness, since such blunders were completely unacceptable. The lady continued to see Rosie instead of the princess, a sweet girl who died at a young age and loved so much to pick flowers with her older brother. It was the spring before Rosie's 10th birthday, and alone in the woods without a nanny to accompany her, the girl felt free and happy, plunging into the world of her dreams under the bright rays of the sun. The drunken night knocked the little girl down, and the unusual flowers that fell to the ground turned a frightening red color, creating an eerie sight. Mother covered her face with her hands, losing her mind from horror and grief, bursting into inconsolable tears that flowed down her cheeks like a river, carrying away with them all hopes and dreams of a happy future. The knight who hit the girl was found guilty and faced severe punishment. As a result, his family and the old people and children who were involved in this tragedy suffered the same fate, filling the hearts of people with sorrow and anger. The guillotine descended with a deafening sound, sparing no one, as if it were bringing with it a terrible sentence that terrified everyone nearby. Margrave harshly criticized his wife's attitude, and soon a loud quarrel broke out between them, full of mutual reproaches and emotions, in which not only words of insult were heard, but also deep discontent, giving rise to questions about. Since then, the father distanced himself from the mother, and they found themselves on different sides, each in their own silence, filled with innuendo and pain, which only increased the gap between them. And that day, the mother seemed to lose her mind again, seeing how the princess almost died. Her heart was filled with horror, and she lost control of herself, plunging into panic and fear for the life of her daughter. Eric called his mother, not wanting her to interfere, and loudly stated that this was his wife's personal business, emphasizing that their relationship was no one else's business. Finally, the doctor finished his examination and announced that a bruise had been found on the girl's right wrist, which, although not dangerous, still caused concern about her condition. Modestly adjusting her hair, the girl declared that she had done everything possible to cure the princess, and now she was beginning to recover, filling everyone with hope and joy. Tallie sighed in relief, closed her eyes and placed her hand on her chest, feeling the tension and fear gradually disappear, replaced by a feeling of hope and calm. Before leaving, the woman leaned over the girl, sympathizing with her for having to suffer so much, and then agreed with her son, allowing him to decide matters with his wife on his own. The young healer folded her hands in front of her and quietly muttered that she would leave too, as if in agreement that it was time to leave this place. However, Eric stopped the girl in a cold tone, asking if there really weren't any other serious wounds on the beauty's body, his voice betraying anxiety and distrust. The doctor immediately admitted that she had noticed old scars that she had not been able to heal due to time, but she was not going to tell anyone about it so as not to ruin their reputation. The girl opened her mouth in surprise when the Count appointed her as the one responsible for the princess's health, not expecting such an important appointment and the enormous responsibility that fell on her shoulders, making her heart beat faster with excitement. With a suitcase in his hands, the doctor was roughly pushed out the door, not wanting to listen to his further speeches and arguments, leaving the man in bewilderment and confusion. His efforts and professional skills were of no importance. Eric closed the door behind her and was left alone with his wife, plunging into a silence full of unresolved issues and growing tension, while his thoughts rushed between caring for her and worrying about his health. Misa stubbornly opened her eyes, but the guy was not so easy to deceive, which he immediately stated, noticing her attempts to pretend to be asleep, and with a slight grin added that he knew perfectly well when she was actually awake. The lady's hand was shaking, betraying her excitement, and it was in a plaster cast so that the limb would remain in one position and the bones could heal properly, which gave the image a touch of vulnerability and fragility. Eric turned to face his wife and asked about the reason for her fall from the balcony, his voice sounding anxious and full of concern as he wanted to understand what happened and how to help her. The man sighed heavily, realizing that he still hadn't received an answer, and closing his eyes tiredly, he felt a wave of disappointment and helplessness wash over him. The nobleman sat down on the bed next to the patient and reassured her, saying that she could tell him everything that was in her heart, and in return he promised not to be angry, creating an atmosphere of trust and understanding. The lady stammered, embarrassed that there was a reason for that, trying to explain her actions but not knowing how to choose the right words to be understood. She felt anxiety growing inside and a desire to convey to him the importance of her decisions. Listening to the indistinct muttering and not receiving a clear answer, Eric put his hand to his temple, feeling a headache from helplessness and fatigue rolling in, realizing that every moment of this conversation only aggravated the internal tension. After this, he firmly ordered his beloved to never hurt herself again in her life, his voice sounding decisive, full of care and concern for her well-being. The girl shuddered in surprise when the guy approached and shouted loudly that she could do whatever she wanted, break everything, but under no circumstances should she harm herself. Eric demanded a promise from her that she would not even think of doing such stupid things again, his voice sounding stern, emphasizing the importance of his words and his concern for the woman's well-being. The frightened lady hugged the blanket to herself and promised that she would do so, her beautiful voice trembling with excitement, and her eyes full of determination not to repeat her previous mistakes. Seeing that the girl wanted to tell him something, Eric asked her, and she, a little embarrassed, answered whether the girl would now be her servant, thinking about how this would affect their relationship and life in general. Misa listened with delight as her husband wanted to appoint a lady healer as her servant, who was well educated and could heal any injury, glad that there would be someone nearby who could help her and provide care. Moreover, despite her cute appearance, the girl was quite strong and could easily deal with a pack of wolves, causing admiration for her courage and determination. Staring at the ceiling, the nobleman added that the lady was also difficult to bribe and was loyal to her masters, demonstrating a steadfastness and devotion that inspired respect. Wanting to lighten the mood of his beloved, Eric reminded the maiden of the knight who guarded their chambers, adding a touch of humor and lightness to their conversation to ease. Now he will guard their western wing from foreign criminals, protecting peace and safety, and giving confidence that there will always be peace in their home. After losing 2 fingers, the man now used his left hand to fight with a sword, displaying incredible willpower and skill despite his limitations. The girl began to play with her fingers, taking offense, and her face filled with playfulness, as if she was trying to distract herself from worries and problems, immersing herself in the world of her small. The beauty beamed with happiness when she heard that her husband had taken a break from work to spend time with her, and her heart filled with joy and anticipation, as if she once again felt the warmth of their closeness and the importance of their moments together. Gently adjusting his wife's hair, the guy added that he would leave in the morning to resolve important issues, but would return to her immediately after, assuring her of his love and care. Misa blushed and opened her mouth shyly, not putting on her usual masks and letting her emotions take over. Sincere feelings were reflected in her eyes, creating an atmosphere of vulnerability and frankness. The girl happily murmured that this meant he would be able to tell her more interesting stories, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity and anticipation of the new adventures she could experience. Misa playfully pulled her husband's expensive clothes, reminding him of his marital duty, and her gentle voice sounded with a slight hint, full of expectation and tenderness. However, the man was extremely angry that she could think such a thing when she herself was so seriously injured, and his anger mixed with deep concern for her condition, causing a storm of emotions in him that he could not contain. Turning away from his wife, Eric ordered her not to think about such things again until she was completely healed and began to recover. His voice was firm, full of concern and a desire to protect her from unnecessary worries. The princess looked away, embarrassed, frowning and taking offense. Her hands were folded in front of her on her knees, expressing inner tension and discontent. When asked why she was so shy and insisted on bedtime every day, Miesa awkwardly replied that she thought that her husband was constantly hinting to her about divorce. The Virgin, referring to the opinion of others, expressed the idea that it would be wise to divorce her as soon as possible and marry Lakin Crispin, who was more suitable for him as a match. The man's face froze in horror as the girl began to talk about herself as a walking disaster. The words sounded as if she herself did not believe in her own abilities and worthiness, and this left him completely bewildered. It was all the fault of the arrogant and haughty Amberic, who during their last meeting was indignant because of the stupid princess, humiliating her and showing his contempt. His arrogant behavior left an unpleasant aftertaste. Eric, gently hugging the girl's shoulders with his strong arms, tried to convince her that he was not going to arrange a divorce and abandon her to her fate, promising support and overcoming difficulties. After he promised to answer any question the princess might have if she had anything interesting to ask, he also added that the extraterrestrial beauty should always turn to him first for help at any time. After this, the aristocrat asked if his beloved had thought that he had been hiding something from her until now. The man's words made her think that perhaps there was some misunderstanding between them. The girl awkwardly looked away, blushing with embarrassment as the guy began to list all the things he shared with her. Her sensitive heart began to beat faster, and she felt how important these moments were. Suddenly he stopped, covering his wife with a blanket, and ordered her to rest. If Misa wanted anything, she could always call the maid. Such a caring gesture showed how important her comfort and peace were to him. The beauty, lying on the bed, admitted that she liked the workshop best of all, because they worked there quietly, unlike the noisy kitchen or laundry. It was a refuge where the lady could enjoy peace and concentrate on her thoughts. It was rumored that Misa often spent time in the company of a maid who quietly worked with her hands while the princess slept soundly on a blanket, creating an atmosphere of calm and comfort. The noblewoman's face lit up with joy and a blush when the boy finally realized that she had gone there to get information, and this realization made their bond even stronger. People often said different things in front of her, thinking that she did not understand anything, and thus revealed their dirty secrets, not realizing that she was listening attentively and noticing everything. A maid with a birthmark on her face accepted a bribe from another wealthy mistress to fulfill her whims, and now finds herself drawn into a world of secret intrigue and manipulation. Excited, Misa loudly declared that she knew everything about everyone and that she could take up espionage, thus trying to impress her husband with her resourcefulness and ability to understand business. The man was impressed by such knowledge, and Misa, unable to restrain herself, told him that Adele did not like the strange nobleman with white hair, which only fueled his interest in her words. The young maids would often whisper behind their senior's back, claiming that she liked more reserved guys, and this created a tense atmosphere among them. Eric was amazed that their butler liked the smart Adele, who often rejected him, not letting him get close to her, and this caused mixed feelings and bewilderment in him. The man, placing his hand next to the beauty's face, understood that all her previous actions had a deep meaning, and this realization made him look at her with new respect and interest. Eric approached his confused wife and quietly said that he wanted to talk to her more closely, hoping to create a more intimate atmosphere for discussing his feelings. Misa beamed happily, hoping that their wedding night would happen today, and this expectation filled her heart with excitement and joy, making her dream of how they would be together. However, instead, Eric began asking about the maid and the bribe, and his questions distracted the resourceful princess from her happy thoughts, causing her to feel anxious and bewildered. Eric wanted to know more details and ordered the lady to answer him if they wanted intimacy in their relationship, a statement that left the beauty confused, making her think about the consequences of such a conversation. Turning her back on her own husband, the girl harshly called him a cheater, her words filled with resentment and disappointment, which only increased the tension in their relationship. A little later, lying on the bed, Miesa explained that tomorrow there was to be a meeting between the maid and the swindler, and also added that they would talk about 3 pillars that were important for their situation. These 3 pillars of the kingdom referred to the 3 families that represented His entire majesty, and their union played a key role in maintaining stability and power in the state. They all had 3 family crests, each depicting a bear, a snake, and a deer, which symbolized their unique qualities and characteristics, and also reflected important traits inherent in their families. Among them, the Salakez family, depicted as a snake coiled around a tree branch, represented the king's mother and was exterminated several years ago, leaving behind a trail of tragedy and uncertainty in the kingdom. It did have its significance, however. It brought back memories of the meeting with Lakin, who had persuaded the count to stay, highlighting the importance of alliances and personal connections in these turbulent times. There, behind the tree, stood a maid with a birthmark on her face, listening attentively to the nobles' conversation and absorbing every word, as if trying to understand their secret plans and intrigues. The princess realized that the pillar the closest maid was meeting with most likely belonged to the Crispin family, and she needed to get the attention of both sides to find out what was really going on. Suddenly the beauty's thoughts were interrupted when Eric tenderly kissed her on the cheek, and at that moment she felt how excitement and joy filled her body, making her forget about the worries and doubts that mercilessly tormented the beauty. The girl shyly pressed her hand to her burning cheek, feeling the warmth from the kiss still spreading across her face, and her heart began to beat faster from excitement and unexpected happiness. The aristocrat himself, possessing the same noble charm, explained that it was a gesture of gratitude for her frank answers. The man's words added even more warmth to the atmosphere, emphasizing the importance of their communication. Looking at her husband in shock, the girl desperately thought about what she should do in such a situation, trying to understand her feelings and find a way out of this situation.